Hey everybody, Jester Borris here with Dungeons and Dragons Through the Realms Worldbuilder as we continue our Through the Realms series. Joining me today, as always,
I'm Troy, the Planescape guy, and today I'm kind of excited. We got a special guest in the studio with us today. We got Ben, who's going to be talking about his world that he built completely from scratch. You crazy man.
Yeah. As you said, I'm Ben. I'm JesterForYou on their Discord channel. And yeah, I've been spending a couple of years building this world, a little over. It has been a labor of love and of pain.
So on today's episode, where previously we've detailed some of the pre-created worlds that you can use for your game, we're going to instead talk about the process that Ben has gone through in particular to create his world setting. Now, Ben, if I remember right, you are using a supplement to the 5th edition Dungeons and Dragons system. That is what?
Right. It is Anime 5e.
Okay, and so that was a Kickstarter project. Tell us a little bit about that if you've got some details for the people that may be interested in picking that up for themselves.
Yeah, absolutely. So Anime 5e is a edition that was created for anime fans like me. And it's just an edition. It gives you all kinds of info on how to build your own creatures or make your own classes, all kinds of stuff. It's super useful. And it breaks down even the old D&D classes into a point-based system, so you can learn to point by and basically build your own class however you want.
That was one of the coolest features, I think, was being able to break those traditionally understood classes down into something more fundamental so that you could roll it into some of these anime archetypes that we're familiar with.
Yeah.
So some of the things to be included are like Monster Trainer, Magical Girl. What are a couple of the other ones in there, Ben?
They've got Samurai, they've got Bender for those Avatar Last Airbender fans. They've got Brokers. There's a Isekai Student, if you're really into the tropes.
What about the guy that has a giant sword that can fly? I like that one.
Yeah, there's a lot. So
There's a lot.
there's a lot.
Yeah, you're gonna need to narrow that down a little bit. It's an anime book.
Yeah.
So ultimately, Anime 5e was really good. It hits all the highlights for bringing those anime archetypes, those flavors, those epic stories to your tabletop game. And
There he is.
there you found it.
Oh, the Tech Knight. Is that what you're talking about? Yeah. They've even got stuff in there for sci-fi fans. Like they've legit put a lot of stuff in there.
So is Macross Pilot in there?
Yeah, Robotech Pilot. But with the Anime 5e in mind, that was the genesis of your project, right? You needed somewhere to play.
Yeah. So the whole reason I wanted to build a world is because I was a huge fan of the anime isekai trope.
Yeah.
And since I wanted that, I was having a hard time making 5th edition into that because you don't see many overpowered characters. And that's part of the trope, is those characters that are overpowered and kind of stomp people along the way.
Sure.
And I wanted to build it, but I didn't know how. And this book literally breaks down how to make overpowered player characters if you want to follow that trope. And it also shows you how you can limit those powers and make it a more traditional game. So it gives you the tools.
Yeah, so that would definitely have a different sort of hero in an anime style, which is very cool. So, as usual, as we go through this today, guys, talking with Ben, we're going to detail some of the maps that Ben has created for his world setting. These are custom maps. They're all very cool. We'll be able to show those off to you. With that, you've created several kingdoms with their own unique cultures, their own histories. You've got a few different large static events that inform the history of your world.
Yeah.
They all, of course, have their own government styles, which is kind of gives them a different flavor. And so commerce was a big thing. I remember that you had a tricky time figuring out. And magic and technology. Ben's world actually is very cool in that different regions have different levels. So you'll see mixes in one area, not so much in another. And then, of course, you've got your own unique monster types, races, and challenges throughout.
Yep.
So, Troy, was there anything you want to add before we have Ben dive into his world setting?
Not that I can think off the top of my head. It's a very unique, and we've been watching you build this for the last year or more. And it definitely is one that I've been excited every time we'd see him. He's like, oh, and I made this. Oh, and I got this now. And every time it was just, wow, this is just, it's very interesting. Everything you got going on. And I don't want to give too much away, but some of the lands are floating. So he's like, well, how do you get from one place to another? Oh, they could be on dragons. I said, well, what about Spelljammer ships? He's like, oh. So now he has Spelljammers.
Yep.
So ultimately, let's dive into a little bit about, like, just to give us the bird's eye view of your world to start with. What is the planet? What is the region? What do you call it? Where are we at?
So the actual world itself is... I originally started with Cristaria is what I was going to name it.
Right.
Because naming a world was the weirdest thing ever. So I originally had named it Cristaria, but I ended up changing the world to Mana for a reason. Because I started building the lore of like the creators, gods, and pantheons, and that whole nightmare. That was very hard for me to grasp. But so Cristaria was the original name, and that's what I had written on my map that I made. But I changed it from that to Mana.
Right. And then, if I remember correctly, we're in a particular region of Mana.
Yes. So the first region I made is actually called the region of Walla El, and that's what this is. That's what the first map I ever made was originally going to be the whole world. And then as I started building, I kept expanding and expanding and expanding. And so now that's just one region.
So, Mr. Producer, if you could show off his original hand-drawn map, and then we'll bring up what he's ended up creating.
Oh, yeah.
So you can kind of see that you can have humble beginnings. Don't be embarrassed about where you guys start on your projects.
Yeah.
It doesn't necessarily indicate where you're going to end up. So
I'm surprised you got this, that you were able to bring this today, because didn't your mom put this on the refrigerator?
No.
No? Well, it should be. It's really well done.
I don't see the hand-drawn one in here.
No, we've got the hand-drawn one up here. I didn't get it until just before we went live.
I got you switched over, so hold up to the camera if you can, please.
All right, guys. Again, this is Ben's original hand-drawn map, and Mr. Producer should be bringing up his current version that he's created.
You got me over here. Okay.
I did have, yeah.
Yeah, somewhere in there. Yeah, so I hand drew that, and some people always wonder how people hand draw maps. I took a handful of beans.
You did the bean trick?
I did the bean trick. That's
Beans or rice is one that I really like.
Yeah.
It gives you an organic shape.
Yeah.
Yeah, it gives you organic shapes, and yeah.
It sounds weird. I took a tiny cup and I put some beans in it, and I just kind of
Plopped them on.
yeah, just around, and then I kind of shaped it a little bit to kind of what I liked, and then I built from there. So
Yeah.
Well, and that can be really important, guys. Sometimes the most difficult part of this project is getting started. So literally put some shapes on some paper, give them some goofy or name A, B, C, anything that gets you into the process, because that can be really daunting, right?
yeah,
You ever sit down to go do a drawing in the blank page and you're like, well, I got some idea, but how do I do this? Or, you know, I'd like to create a world. Well, a handful of beans can really get
changed a lot of what I did over the last couple of years. And so I talked to Gwydion a few times.
Yeah.
When I met you guys at the store, and he talked about how he built from like outer space inward down to the planet, and I thought that was a super cool way to do it. It was not for me.
It was not. That's
Yeah, we hear that a lot.
so. Yeah, there's a couple different methods. We've talked a little about it a little bit as we go through for like adding locations. Particularly when you start from your story and then you need to have a location, you tend to build from that out.
Yeah, from like a little town, and then you kind of build from there. And I just started with a map. I started with a handful of beans.
Right, so you were about mid-level. You weren't in space with Gwydion and Rocket Ship.
I was in the middle ground, and it was easier for me to start with a map than with a town, because a town is easy to envision, but where is that town located became a whole nother problem for me.
You're right.
I was like, oh, this would be a really cool town. It's a shame I don't know where it would be on a map and what that map would look like. So I started with a handful of beans and a piece of paper, and that worked.
Awesome. So, Mr. Producer, go ahead and bring up that world map or the regional map. And you ended up using some software. Tell us about how that went for you, Ben.
Yeah, so upon your guys' recommendation, I tried out Incarnate. And at first I used the free model to just kind of try and build a map, because I was just curious if I could replicate what I had drawn, because I didn't want to stray too far from this, because I liked how this turned out.
Okay.
Because it was a labor of love. And Incarnate was fantastic.
Now, guys,
and relatively cheap.
I do want to mention that we are not sponsored in any way. We're dudes in a studio, but there are several really good map making softwares available, and Incarnate is one that we've come to really enjoy using. It's got several different levels. You can purchase it for a year. There's a lifetime level. It's very intuitive if you've used any sort of graphics editing software. But again, there's a couple of them out there that have different styles and levels of participation and stuff. So find the one that works well for you. But Ben, you ended up using and liking Incarnate.
Yes, and the reason I liked it is because it was very simple to learn. I looked at another one called World Anvil because I'm also, not only am I building my own world, I'm trying to build my own campaign to fit inside of the world that I'm building.
World Anvil is very nice in that it does have those tools where you can sort of do it all in the same pot.
Which is why I was excited about it.
Yeah.
And then I tried to use it and I was like, I am smart. But not this smart. And it was far easier for me to keep my notes on my tablet and my map on my piece of paper. And then when I got Incarnate, it was very easy to just keep the map on there, and then my tablet can keep my information. So it worked for me.
I really enjoy Worldbuilder. I have a background in computers and programming, so that layout sort of makes sense to me. But it can be a little daunting. Because it allows you to do so much and link everything and this and that.
Yeah.
It does have a bit of a learning curve, but World Anvil is a very good one as well.
Yeah. It is.
So, Troy, I remember when we looked at his maps the last time, you had actually quite a lot to say about where he ended up with.
What, the floating ones?
Well, not just his floating islands, but his digital maps that he created versus where he started there. Because we've seen 4 or 5 different versions of his maps as we've gone to different live events and met up with Ben in places.
Yeah, and I think this is your only hand-drawn one, though, right?
Right, yeah. This was
the other
only
ones were all
hand-drawn
done with Incarnate.
Right, and when I went into Incarnate, I found out that I could do not just world maps, I could do regional maps or even battle maps. Yes. And so that changed my whole idea of what I was doing, and that's one of the reasons why I expanded my world, is because I'm like, well, I can do so much more with this than I can with a single piece of paper and some beans. And but this starting there helped. But Incarnate made a huge difference. And so now I have a map specific for my floating islands. I have a map specific for some of the other regions, and it really helps.
So when you're doing your maps, maps typically will show like grassy areas and forest and rivers and mountains. Was there any part of your terrain that was unique enough that Incarnate didn't have a quick little symbol that you could throw on there?
So yes. So the floating islands was one of the things that was difficult because it's hard to build floating islands on a map. So I had to build its own map. So that was one thing, because the floating islands are not stationary. It's not like they're just floating. They move. So making a map with floating islands on it, even if I could make it, it wouldn't make any sense, because the players would then look at the map and go, oh, well, I want to go there. Well, it's not there. It's there, but it's not there. So it's there. It would get a little tricky. So
when you say floating islands, okay, just sort of another description turn here. Would it be safe to say it's more like one of the clouds? It's there, but it's always moving in a current. So it's going to be going around the planet? Part
of it is lore, and yes, it does move around the planet. Part of it is lore-based, so it generates, that island particularly generates water for a particular reason. Again, lore-based. I don't want to get too much into it, because if one of my players see it, I don't want them to know the mystery. But because it generates its own water, as it disperses into the sky, it becomes a cloud. So yes, there's always a cloud beneath it, because that's where the water flows off.
Okay.
So yes, it's a hidden flying island, effectively.
So to actually place it on a map would be difficult.
Yes.
Here's the other thing that's interesting about maps that I come back to is it's there from someone's understanding. So obviously the maps that you've created are sort of the maps. Do you have any plans for creating maps that would be things that your players will end up getting as handouts that will introduce them to certain regions as they grow and explore the world?
Yes, so I personally, as the GM, will have maps for every region. The players will not. The reason being is because there's where my world, time, and place is starting for them to come into the world. There's certain continents that are not explored. So they will show up at that continent and have nothing. And I wish them luck.
But that is the nice thing. You know what they're going to encounter there.
Yep.
They're going to experience it as part of the story.
Yep.
So that's kind of fun.
Yeah.
Did you end up doing, aside from the floating island, anything else that would be considered unique or different outside of what you might find in regular geography?
Yeah, I do have an undercroft built in my world.
Okay.
So there's large portions of the world, different islands or different continents are connected underground.
Mhm.
And there is one central location that is a civilization of sorts that's connected underground.
Okay, so we've got the regular world, an underworld, and a floating island.
Yeah, because I had to do it all.
Very cool, Ben.
Because why not?
Yeah.
Ultimately,
yeah.
how many nations did you end up with?
You didn't know it was going to be a test.
More than 5. At least 7. At least 7.
At least seven.
At least 7.
Dang it, Beans.
Yeah. On this map,
Well,
on
I have
my
6 individual maps here, and then
Yeah.
I have the 2 full maps, so at least 6.
yeah. So I have one continent that is solely one nation. I have one continent that is split into 3 nations, and then I have another continent that is unexplored. So good luck finding out what's there.
Right.
And then I have my island region here that, the Wall L, and it's got multiple nations. It's got a republic. It's got all kinds of stuff.
So the one thing that once you have a land mass, however you generate it, how did you go about deciding where boundaries or borders would be placed?
So at first I did not. I was like, I'm going to make every island its own country.
Okay.
And then I thought about it, and I was like, there's a whole bunch of island nations in our world that before we, colonized or did whatever to them,
Yeah.
they were already connected and already had tribes or kings, or so it would not be a problem for these islands, some of them, to have contact or even treaties or whatever. So how I decided it was mostly in correlation, how close they were to each other, and then I would decide ally or enemy.
Sure.
What would make a good story? What if my players wanted to start on this little island patch? What is it? Are they enemies? Are these 3 islands fighting each other? Or is it a republic of 3 islands that have weird political stuff going on that now the players are kind of wrapped up in? So I kind of tried to make sure that each faction or each kingdom that I built was interesting enough on its own that I could run a whole game just there. But also, if they wanted to leave, I wanted to know where they could go safely, because if they're at war with each other, those 3 islands,
Yeah.
you might be fine in this one nation. There might be some stuff you can do there, but can you go to the other island without?
Yeah, closed
stabbed,
borders and things like that.
So-
There's a
Sure.
blockade currently in the...
Right. So how I generally decided it is I decided how close that proximity was going to be, and then what races were there, or because in the real world there's prejudice. There always
sure.
is of some kind, and so how prejudiced are these nations? It helped me decide how they were politically or wherever.
Right. And that starts to develop a little bit into cultures. But ultimately, when it came to placing your political entities on the map, it wasn't just this whole island is these guys by default.
Right.
And so you took a little bit of inspiration from our history, a little bit of understanding of the nature of peoples,
Yep.
and it ended up with some really interesting mixes and divisions. Because then from there, you did say you had to start to figure out what peoples live here, and that informed other decisions as you went through the rest of the process that we'll talk about when we get there.
Right.
So just real quickly, I want to go back to your motivations around different prejudice between the different peoples on an island. So in all manners of people, regardless of where they live, a lot of things are going to develop into a prejudice over time.
Or
It doesn't-
stereotypes.
and stereotypes.
Which may or may not be
Right.
hurtful. Yeah.
So if you have, let's just take a small island nation. They have very limited resources. So the 2 tribes on that island are going to fight over that resource all the time. And over time and generations, one half of the island is going to hate the other side because, everybody's going after the same damn coconuts. And there's only so many coconuts here.
Yeah.
There's only so many fish or crabs here. And you develop that where I hate you because you're taking food from my family. And so the resource can be something as simple as the food on an island, but you're also going to get into the gold mine that's up in the mountains. Whoever got there first claims it.
Yeah.
But the other people are going to hate them because now you guys are rich and we're poor. So there becomes an animosity that builds up, and over time it turns into prejudice. And you can, look back at the Hatfields and McCoys. They hated each other to the point of killing each other. Well, why? It was because of pig. And if you look at the original story, there is no right or wrong in the story. but that's where it started from. A lot of times the prejudice come from the limited resources. Not always, but I mean, that's definitely a source of where that can come from over time. And people hate each other for a variety of reasons.
Yeah.
And it just depends on what the motivations is that you give them. So it can be over resources, it can be over people. Oh, that island has pretty girls, let's go there. And everybody shows up. The people that live there said, that's our women, you ain't getting none. So the fighting, when it goes from being a prejudice and just a thought of, I don't like these guys, and it turns into an action, when you make that leap, you look at those motivations. And some of them can be strong. And it's kind of interesting because almost every drama, you can boil it down to the simple motivation of why did it start?
Yeah.
And you'll find, they're calling it these days, they're calling it a hate crime. Well, that's about every crime there is. I'm gonna go rob a bank. That's a hate crime. Why is that a hate crime? Well, I hate you because you got all the money. So.
For sure.
Anyway.
It's just, so as we see, we start with maps. We've placed some borders, and we start getting into cultures.
Hey,
Yeah.
check it out. It's floating island maps.
Yeah.
So,
I want that sword. Look at that.
Yeah.
Swinging one-handed.
of course, it's one-handed. That makes you an excellent swordsperson.
Yeah.
Well, yeah, if it's less than 9 feet, Dad, it's one-handed sword.
When it came to cultures, were there certain cultures that you spent more time on or less time on?
So yes, some of them were more complicated than others because I didn't know as much about them. I had to do my research. Republic is pretty easy. That's what the U.S. was. We were founded as a republic, so that was easy for me. I was like, oh, these three islands are a republic. They're different races, but they all kind of mingle. That's fine. That's great.
Right.
There were some that I struggled with, and I think the ones I struggled with the most were anything to do with monarchs, because there's basically no monarchies currently in effect. You can find lots of info on monarchies, but there were none in effect. And I liked history, but a lot of the history I liked to study was like Mayan, Incan, Egyptian,
right? The things
Greek,
that we all got whitewashed over in high school.
Yeah,
so.
you mean all the recent ones?
All the recent.
Yeah. So the monarchy type stuff I think was the most difficult for me because the monarchy, even before what we see in like England, the current monarchy that's there, that monarchy is still not traditionally what monarchy was.
Exactly.
Parliament runs a lot of what's going on over there. Well, before Parliament existed and monarchies existed, the king supposedly held absolute power, but not really. If you look back, there were lords that had more armies, more money than the king. The king was basically relying on goodwill of the, important people.
So you were the lord of the land. The king says, "I need you to take your army over here." And then,
So
and that's where he did hold the executive, judicial, and legislative power. That power had to be backed up in some way, often within the court, and then the symbology of the crown or the throne with your loyalty to.
And as you follow the monarchy along, eventually you get into like where the church comes in, religion, right? The Pope, right? And the Pope at one time had his own army and kingdom and everything else.
Yeah,
still does. Yeah.
The Vatican is a city state.
Yeah, they're like one of the top 5 richest nations in the world.
And they have a standing army of 40,000.
Yeah,
the Vatican. Yes.
So
church needs an army.
Because of the heretics.
Crusades. Okay, Crusades. We had one. We need another.
But we had 2.
Oh, that's true.
So we get in the monarchies. We don't have a whole lot of modern historical experience with what a monarchy would actually look like in practice.
Yeah.
Same thing with a theocracy. You kind of get some ideas, and there's a lot of maybe you can draw on some kind of the kooky conspiracy stuff to really spice up what a theocracy gone wrong might look like, or something like that.
Yeah.
The Inquisition.
But I can see where you might have some issues if you're because you draw a lot on what you know. For your inspiration, just because of how your mind works. So, did you end up with more republics, or do you think you have a good mix of government types and things?
I've got a really big mix. So I've got there's a difference between empires and monarchies.
Yes.
So I've got empires, I've got monarchies, I've got dynasties, I've got republics. I have a whole pirate nation. For anyone who likes the whole that's what I'm talking about. So I've got a lot of different things, and I've got the region that is unexplored actually has a theocracy in it that is corrupt. So I'm glad you brought that up. So it's something that, you know, that's out there. So I've tried to cover as many different types as I can, because if ever my players get a wild hair to go and do something, I want to make sure that they find something new. That was kind of my thing, is I wanted them to constantly be like, oh, wow, this is new.
Sure.
So when you're looking at the government types and all the different ones, were there any that stood out to you, like, oh, well, this one's going to have more drama in it than this government? They're just going to stir up stuff all the time. These guys are going to sit back and wait.
Well, there's the internal versus external strife question, I think, kind of lends itself based on governmental type.
Yeah.
But when it, you know, when you're developing the cultures, right? Because the kind of people that you are sort of dictates the sort of government that you would establish.
Right.
And that changes over time as resources and different things become available. We've seen that anthropology has been able to establish some of these ideas. But did you spend a lot of time sorting out your cultures once you were like, okay, these guys are a republic? Did they cross and form some of your cultural?
Right. Yeah. So because architecture also, right? Well, you know, you look at the Greeks' architecture, and then you look at the Roman architecture. They took inspiration, and so I think that was kind of one of the things, especially with the Republic that I worked on. There's 3 different races, primary races of the Republic. There's orcs, elves, and man. That's the Republic, or those 3. So their architecture on their, you know, their natural island, their starting island, like the orc culture, their culture and their building styles and the gods they worship and things are all very unique to them. But it's not that you won't see it on the other islands, but you'll prominently see it there.
Right.
And so, yeah, they bleed over into one another's nations, but they also, you'll see them primarily there.
Did you focus on some other old cultural indicators like style of dress or foods? Did you get into a lot of that? Tell us, like, when you went to sit down and say, okay, the orcs or the elves, what questions did you ask yourself so that our viewers might be able to use that?
Yeah.
So that they can develop cultures when they build their worlds.
So I wanted my cultures to be what I wanted them to be.
Sure.
So for the orcs, if you look at either anime or even in, if you go to like Lord of the Rings, you know, the origin of orcs in Lord of the Rings, you know, you look at those histories and it doesn't really show a whole lot of their culture. Not really.
No, they're always the bad guy. They're never shown as a people.
Exactly. And so for me, what I wanted to see from the orcs wasn't this tent living, dirty muck of a thing. What I wanted to show off was they're very strong and they adapt really well. So their buildings are pretty earthy, you know. So they're gonna have, you know, brick, stone, mud, you know, whatever they can build, they will build, because if they get lost, well, they live here now. You know, they're hardy people. Like, they're tough guys, you know.
Yeah.
So their architecture would look something like that. And so I asked myself what I wanted to see in that culture, in that race, in my world. Because it doesn't have to be the same as another world. You know, if I were playing in Lord of the Rings, all the orcs are naturally evil. But they don't have to be in my world, because it's my world. I'll do what I want.
And that's a big point there, guys. Remember that as you're developing these things, as you're writing it, it's your choice.
Yeah.
You can have as many fantastical races or none. Everything, you could have no humans and only be fantastical races.
Yeah.
The choice is yours. And so, you know, as long as you have internal justification and you keep internal consistency within your writing, you can make any decision that you'd like, and it's the proper one because it's yours.
So yeah, with the orcs it was like that. With the elves, elves traditionally have very woodland type or very clean, pretty, whatever, and it's cool. I like that. I've always liked that about the elves, being that way. But if I were to bring that to what I think a culture would look like now, I look at like the traditional Japanese culture.
Okay.
A lot of their buildings very crisp, very clean, very earthy looking when it comes to their tones. Like, it just, to me,
they had a lot of natural, right? So
yes, yeah.
Although their woodwork was done well, their tiling, their styles, yeah.
Don't ask about how much time I've spent watching traditional construction of buildings from other.
So, Ben, how many?
But yeah, the way they built it was vastly different from how we build houses. Europeans included. Like, how the Japanese built houses was weird. Really cool if you're interested in random things that you look up on the internet.
Well, the compacting of the earth, the setting of stones, the setting of the structure on the stone. Very interesting.
Yeah.
Troy, you've had a crack or two at putting some world stuff together. What notes do you have when it comes to creating cultures or modifying, cultures for use in a tabletop game?
Well, modifying, I've done a lot of modifying. Building from scratch, I've done very little, just because I saw, you can see in the process early on that it's going to be a very large undertaking, which we warned Ben about this a couple of years ago.
Well, it's been a couple years.
Yeah. So I've done a lot of modifying where, especially with some elves and some orcs, and make a different kind of tribe. So you start with the basic orc, and they're a very tribal person. And so they develop banners or colors that they would wear, and they're very proud of their tribe. And goblins and elves as well, because they have their village and they're very proud about their village. Yes, you're an elf, but you're not from here, so you're from out of town as far as everybody else be concerned. One of the movies that came out that they also used that concept, and I was like, this is exactly what I've used in D&D a lot. The Warhammer movie, they were very tribal, and it wasn't one tribe, but the several tribes coming together and talking about the politics. But who likes this guy, who hates that guy, and why? And oh yeah, I'm going to put an axe in his head the next time I get a chance to. So when you're doing any of your modifying or building from scratch or changing anything, one of the words, and you mentioned a minute ago, is justification. I want these guys to all wear blue, and they're going to use some kind of berry that only grows in their area of the woods. And so they use that blue to paint stripes on their armor and on their arms. So when they get into a fight, you can see everybody has a blue stripe on them from the same tribe. And these guys, they're all wearing yellow stripes because there's a flower that grows over there, only over there, and they use that to color their armor and their bands. And so they're very proud of their area. So you can look at any race, any village, anywhere in the real world, and they're proud of their hometown. It doesn't matter. You go down the road to the next hometown, and they're proud of their hometown. And it's like high school football rivalries. They're always talking smack about this team, this town over here. But, if you get the two of them together, it's all for fun. And sometimes when you get a little higher in the food chain, it's not just for fun. You get countries hating countries because the king said this and, whatever. But if you can justify how they do this, why they do that, and this guy wants this to happen, and you can, because justifying will make you develop a backstory, and you start tying things together, and it all makes more sense. And then when your players get into your story and you're doing down the road, you say, oh, that's why they wear blue. Okay, I get it now. It makes more sense. And if you just have these little things that you tie in all the way down the road, because one of the things that I saw early on in the game I was running, there was a band of orcs, and they wore blue, and they're from the Pomars. And they were like bigger orcs, they were tougher orcs. They were, cornbread fed, eating, these are the big boys. And every time they showed up, if there was goblins, the goblins would just run because they know those guys meant business and they weren't going to quit till they're all dead or in a box. Yeah. And when I started up my Holy War campaign, it was one of those things that, hey, we ran into those orcs again. The ones that wear blue. And I remember one of the first big seedings with the NPCs, some generals and this, and the players were like, they just got their butt kicked and then coming back with a report. Yeah, we ran into those guys again. And then across the table, some high elves that were there to just, going to do some things with magic. Because orcs wearing blue, you must be seeing things. Orcs don't decorate their armor. And they're like, yeah, they do. Like, it starts to take on, why would they do that? And for the longest time, you're like, you don't know why. But then eventually when they figure it out, it makes more sense. It ties your stories together.
Yeah. So as something that you do, Jester, as a part of the D&D stuff, is like orcs and goblins typically have a standing bounty. So like you'll collect an ear from them, but only one ear. Because if you have like a left and a right, well, how do I know this isn't from the same guy? I'm only paying you for one. So some of the orcs, there's a orc tribe that I put together that's basically the flip side of all of the heroes, right? So it's a big Colosseum gladiator pit full of everything out of the monster manual. You know, Ettins, orcs, goblins, gnolls, all of them, right? But they all decorate their left ear, paint, earrings, everything on one ear only. And it's kind of like, you know, the English doing the, you know, flipping off the French with the longbow, you know, come get it, right?
Yeah.
Yeah, and then if you do get it, you're like, well, it's decorated in this style. This was,
Right.
you know, Nasher the orc.
Yeah.
It's not just an orc. So
Yeah.
Real quick, I want
yeah.
to throw out a hey, how you doing to Stark? I'm gonna say this wrong. Star Cop 3, talking about our tribal culture, which we were just kind of running through here.
Yeah.
Appreciate any and all your comments. Actually, he says I propose looking at Klingon art and architecture. Absolutely.
Yeah.
Each of the households, when you saw them on screen, regardless of what the TV show was, you're like, that's General Markov.
And that's where I got some of that stuff for the ear decorations from the Bajorans, right? Each one had a house on
Absolutely.
their earring. You knew
Right.
who it was, you know where from, and their
Right.
status
Yeah.
was more decorated or not, right?
Right. So the tribal culture, and you can look at the American Indians. Every single one of them, you know, the uneducated person will go, "Oh my God, it's an Indian." They say, "Well," I love it when you see this old cowboy say, "Well, that's a Cherokee. We ain't got to worry about too much about him. Let's just keep going over here." And a little bit later, you see some Indians, and just like one guy on a horse. He says, "Yeah, we got to go. We got to go." This is what you're talking about. It's just one Indian. Yeah, but that's Apache. We got to go.
Yeah, there's 3 more on the other side of that.
Yeah. So it's a way to distinguish your characters.
Yeah.
And what's really fun is when you get somebody that brings that kind of development to their player character
yeah.
and their clothes and their everything.
This is something that we touched on a little bit when we discussed Forgotten Realms cultures. There's, you know, humans are prolific across there, but humans in this region will have different skin tone variations, different hair color. So you can even go and do genetic variation across your peoples, but they tended towards these colors or tended towards these types of materials in their clothes, you know.
Real quick, if I can, from his book again.
Oh, no.
Here's an anime orc. He's very colorful. So, other than the colors, the write-up itself is not that much different from standard 5e, really.
Yeah.
Other than he's a little different colored.
Yeah. And again,
His weapon is normal size. I think that's you know.
yeah, they break down how they built them so that way you can make another creature whatever you want, and you can make it the same kind of CR rating,
Yeah.
quote unquote.
Yeah.
So
But his axe is normal size.
Yeah.
You know, like the hero has a 9-foot weapon. I just
yeah,
This is why he loses. His weapons can't
yeah. Look,
get there.
if he had a 9-foot axe, he'd have won.
He might be a little bit more important when the die is so bad. So, you know, some notes on the culture again, distinguishing your peoples, setting them apart, and then particularly when it's your world setting, you can make the decisions, simply justify them. It will give you little bits of daily life that can help breathe more life into your setting. You know, why do they do this? Oh, because this berry exists over there, and they utilize it in their everyday. So now those people exist in a larger world, and when you come into contact with them, there's more context to it. So those are some of the things that are pretty interesting.
one of the subclass of ranger that I had that was in the Sus Force, which is near the Palmarge area. These rangers, as part of their trials and tribulations that they would go through to, I'm a badass ranger. So they were wearing these brown cloaks, right? But part of their training, they had to go out into basically poison ivy and poison sumac, poison oak, and get it all over the outside of their cloaks. And the purpose of that was when they're going somewhere, there was a way for them to leave a message that they'd been there without actually being seen, because they would go through the guards and stuff and they would gently brush on somebody. And the next day, of course, if you got poison oak, you're like, you know, red rash and everything. It was a way for them to prove that they were there and had done something without being seen. Because if you're seen, then you get captured. And all that. So the whole purpose was to not be seen when you're doing your sneaky stuff.
Well, see, that comes down to the classic argument. Do you want to be the best thief in the world or the most well-known thief in the world?
Captain Jack. Oh, but you have heard of me.
Yes, one of those. So
Anyway,
that brings us to our next point. We're going to talk a little bit now about the history of your world setting.
which you developed from scratch.
Yes.
So how many years? Because Forgotten Realms did 30,000. So
Well, they've got a lot longer to go,
35.
right?
Yeah, how many beans are involved in the,
You just rolled percentage dice.
I will-
the great cup which doth holdeth the bean of
So I started with mine. I started with an idea, and it did not feel as grand as the world that I was building. So I had to increase the pantheon and gods and things.
Right.
So I originally had one major power that started creation, and then there were 6 creatures after that, and then it kind of broke down from there.
Right.
But originally it was just the 1 and the 6, and that was it. That's all I had. And then I was like, well, this culture, what about false gods? Wouldn't people worship false gods, or wouldn't some gods be more powerful than others? And so then wouldn't culture be impacted differently than another? And then I was like, but then, I didn't want them all to share the same gods. I was like, because that doesn't create any religious problems. So then that kind of negates one of the ways you can have wars or conflicts. And I was like, I didn't like that. So out of desperation, I increased the pantheon a lot. Just so that way I would have more interest in the world for its own sake, not necessarily just for the player's sake, but for its own sake, because through our history, through human history, religion has been one of the top 3 reasons to go to war.
For sure.
The other 2 are resources and women, and all of them have turned out bad because of war. But in a world where there needs to be conflict for interest for characters of some kind, and it doesn't always have to be war, religious conflict can be a thing. And so I wanted to make sure there was enough religious splits in places that there may or may not be conflict on different places.
And to Ben's point, conflict doesn't necessarily mean with swords, knives, and bloodshed.
Right.
It could be pilgrims, clerics, conversions, theological debates,
politics.
Political debates, which is why I liked having the Republic in there, is because, let's face it, we're constantly debating in the U.S., which I think is great, but it's all the time. Like
100% of the time.
nobody knows how to shut up for 10 minutes. So yeah, political conflicts, religious conflicts, physical conflicts. There's lots of ways to have conflict. And so I wanted to make sure I had as many options of conflict as possible, because let's face it, there's some players who love the political intrigue, espionage, 007, license to kill stuff. There's other people who love grand wars, and there's other people who, the conflict they want is not related to, politics or religion. They just want a good fight. And so I wanted to have the option of any of that in my world. And the place I was really lacking on was the Pantheon, which some of your guys' videos helped a ton with me helping myself build that Pantheon out more, because I really felt like it was lacking a ton of work.
So how many gods did you wind up with?
Well, here's
A lot.
here's the other question.
Is there a god of beans in agriculture?
There is probably, but so
There is now.
in your initial setup, you had sort of like one creator entity, right?
Right. Yes.
And then from there, it had 6 other entities. What were those 6 that respond?
So those 6 were actually almost creatures of absolute power. So they weren't gods or deities like you would think of, like, oh, Zeus or Poseidon.
Okay.
They were more like the elements that they face.
So they were like, you might consider them like cosmological or
almost
elemental.
like the Titans, right?
Yeah, okay.
So they're kind of like that. They're kind of just giant forces of nature. Not that they're not intelligent. They just they're powerful enough that they can create and destroy things
Kaiju.
easily. Actually, sort of, yes. They're actually very large creatures on scale.
So yeah,
I want to go to the Church of Godzilla. I'll make the sacrifice of Tokyo.
There's a whole bunch of jokes there. I'm not going to start. I'm just going to move on.
But so when you get to that point though, and you start to see, okay, this culture has these things that are important to them in their region. This is how they developed through the history, as I understand, and I've written it. You found that you needed things that were probably more mundane, right? So did you end up with like gods of fertility and war and those things that were more typical?
So I had to break it down. This is part of the history of the world, and
Part 1.
yeah, part of building the world is knowing the history of the world and why the things are the way that they are.
Right.
So I started with those 6 creatures. Those 6 creatures together built the world.
Mhm.
And of course, they wanted to build more than just a place to rest on. They wanted to build creatures, other things.
Right.
And so they created gods, basically. They created gods. And then those gods created lesser gods. And then all of those together started creating different races, and of course started kind of flourishing the world.
God,
And then
D&D's like, this is too much work. I need help.
so yeah, basically, it's kind of how I broke it down. So there's one really powerful creature that spawned really powerful physical creatures,
Right.
and then those creatures created gods, and then those gods created lesser gods, and then all of them together over time had created the different races and stuff. And part of the history of the world and why I have the world the way it is because I want a lot of it to be hidden in mystery and shrouded. So if you were to walk up in this world as a character and ask, who's the strongest god in the universe? None of them would name the original creator.
Right.
There's been several calamities since these gods were even really known. And so now the popular gods are the gods and lesser gods. Most of them don't even know that those other creatures, those 6...
Right, the tiers above exist.
Right. They the knowledge of that stuff is just gone.
StarCop 3 makes a note here that I smell Neil Gaiman in the spirits below the creator. The name sounds familiar?
Neil Gaiman's a writer.
Oh, okay.
Okay.
I don't read. I want you to know. I write all of this. I don't read any books. The only books I have ever read is Lord of the Rings. I kid you not. I don't. Reading is not my thing.
Well, the multi-layers, what you're talking about, is something that has been used in different Pantheon descriptions and fantasy fiction.
It does not surprise me. So I took a lot of my inspiration from Roman and Greek pantheons and some Egyptian and Aztec pantheons.
Yeah.
Because some of the gods throughout history that are in pantheons are weird, and some of their stories are weird. They're not stories like grandiose, amazing things. Some of them are stupid, like Norse mythology. If you've heard any of their stuff out of the Poetic Eddas, it's hilarious.
Oh yeah, dude, that's the
Thor farting his way out of hell with fire for man, like just hilarious.
Loki is a freak.
Loki turning himself into a horse and then sleeping with Thor's horse and then giving birth to a different. It's weird. It's so weird.
It's so weird. So there's tons of inspiration to be had.
Like, dude, you had sex with a horse. How is that a prank?
Sounds like you got pranked. It sounds like you pranked you. So yeah, for me, building the history of the world was later. So I built the world, but then I needed to build the history of the world, and so it was kind of backwards because you think you'd want the history to explain why the world exists, but I started with the world and then explained why the world suddenly magically exists.
Well, and this is the process thing. Sometimes it's easier to start with what do I have,
and
then figure out how
I had a handful of beans on a piece of paper. That's what I had.
So, but once you've established what the world is, right? So from a writing perspective, you say, okay, this is what we've got, right? Here's America, South America. And then you're like, well, how did these people get there? Or how did this happen? And so you start winding history back, sort of like winding back the Big Bang to figure out what the hell went on before all this. And sometimes you'll find the weird stuff, but it's a good way to, and you don't even really necessarily have to go very far, but you say, this is what I've got, this is how it got there. And then that gives you enough context and justification typically to start with your stories from there.
Yeah, and when you write down your ideas, this is vitally important. Write down every idea you have, not because you will use all of those ideas, but because you may. And also for the ones you know you're going to use, if you have it written down, like I started with my pantheon. I had my pantheon of, all 7 gods. And so I had that, and then I just left it alone. I was like, all right, I got my gods for the world. I'm not worried about it. And then, as I was watching videos and building my world and expanding, I was like, this is not enough. So I went back to that note of just those and just expanded it tremendously because I saved it. I still had it.
Yeah.
And it's huge. It's important. And knowing not just that you have gods or names for gods, but knowing exactly what they can do makes a big difference. Part of the history of my world, there's a region that we may talk about more, but it has next to no magic users, and no magic users are ever born on that continent.
Interesting.
So its technological advancements are far superior to other countries. but they can't use magic. They don't have that to use. So the only way they've even remained their own power is because they advanced so quickly. They had to
relative to
keep the
everybody
magic
else.
out.
Yeah.
Because magic is evil in that area, you know.
Right.
Yeah, they're like magic missile, and they're like
Missile.
Yeah.
So the technology is really great there, which is where the pirates came from, privateers, because they had to start from somewhere, you know. So knowing what your gods impact in the world and how they impact it makes a difference. One of the gods that helped create that continent is the reason why there's no magic, because of how that god functions to balance everything. Because if there is something of absolute magic, there has to be something of no magic.
Yeah.
Just like if there has to be day, there has to be night. And for me, I have one giant sun, but I have 2 moons to balance it. So all these details that when you're building your history make the difference in your changes in your world.
With your different deities, did you come up with some that are, these are gods of elves, these are gods of dwarves, these are gods of orcs?
Yes.
Or is it, these are gods of this this country?
This region,
Yes. So there are races who claim, oh, this is the god that made us and we are the best race on the planet. There are people who are like that in the world. And so whether that god actually made them or not, you know, who knows? That was way back. But they claim certain gods and claim that they're the one race to rule them all, so to speak. Because there always will be those people.
One thing
it's the one ring. So,
so particularly with histories, you can. So we're dealing here with a fantasy setting. So when you get to the far, far back history, of course, the gods and the primordial forces and things like that can be important. But I want to let people know that you don't have to necessarily include much or any of that. So, you know, if you have a setting or system where faith and religion as themes aren't very important, then you can skip over those.
Yeah.
And, you know, knowing where the planet came from, you know, if you want to go based off of current scientific models of what we understand for planet formation and stuff, all of that's fine too.
Yeah.
But again, you can have fun with it. It's your story, it's your setting, and it is a fantasy, so it's kind of nice to be fantastical with it. Even when we get into like hardcore sci-fi, where we're dealing with the nature of man and cybernetics and those sorts of things, juxtapositioning the hyper technology versus questions of faith can sometimes be the black and white comparison needed to really highlight your story themes. So don't ignore it completely, but you know what I guess what I'm getting at is participate with it at the level you're comfortable with.
Yeah.
And don't feel as though you need to include it or have it be omnipresent in your systems, but it can make for a very interesting fantasy world.
Yeah. And
because as we've seen with like Lord of the Rings or any of the D&D settings and things like that, it's quite central.
yeah.
So
Well, and I think especially in like sci-fi, because I love sci-fi. Fantasy I enjoy more, but I love sci-fi. And so when you look at some of the sci-fi stuff that's going on, I think of like Firefly.
Yeah.
With Preacher, you know, it's got Preacher book.
Yeah.
That's the only religious person in that whole series. But it's a wonderful way to introduce religion if you want to into your world. You don't have they didn't build the world around that religion at all. They didn't build that universe out of religion at all.
No.
But they added in a character which created a question that could have been used later, you know?
Sure.
I mean, so that's one of those things. When you're building a world, if you miss something, you're like, oh, that could be an interesting thing to add in my world. That doesn't mean you have to have it from the start. You could absolutely add it in through a character or place or theme randomly and then be like, hey, I built this and added it to my world. Look at what I made.
For sure. And that's the things where you, like to Troy's point earlier, when you brush up against something and it adds context to the rest of the world and gives it life.
Yeah.
When we're getting into the histories a little bit now past your creation part of things, you've got certain events that you've established. You said there's been some calamities. We probably had a few wars. Tell us about some of the more tangible textbook style history you've got for your world setting.
So the calamities are the reason why I wanted some of the gods to be shrouded. And why I wanted those calamities are actually due to the 6 creatures that were made. So they're the ones that caused both major calamities, and then they kind of just dispersed and went into hiding because they kind of wrecked the world.
Tell us about the natures of the calamities specifically, because the one that I really like is the mountain that the gods threw at this one guy in Dragonlance in Kryn. And there's a pre-mountain fall and a post-mountain fall world map. It's that big a deal.
Yeah.
So what were the calamities that you're dealing with in your setting?
So I'll talk about the most recent calamity. The most recent one is why there's a flying island. The most recent one is the reason why there's even an undercroft. So when the calamities happened, what happened is the created beings on Earth started going to war. Well, the lesser gods are like, oh, well, I'm going to help the people that I support, that love me, that worship me. And so, of course, then the minor gods started fighting. And then, of course, the gods who created them were like, don't mess with my kid. You know? So then they got involved. And then before you know it, the calamity happened. And those greater creatures are like, well, if you're going to mess with my stuff, I'm going to mess with your stuff. And it, it's kind of like siblings fighting. And so that second calamity kind of ended. That's when basically everyone after the calamity was over, the gods were all like, all right, let's just keep out of it. This is between them. Because my little island area that I made used to be one giant continent.
So it was one large landmass, and now it's a shattered archipelago.
Yes, exactly. Because the floating islands got ripped up from just the immense amount of magic that was expelled just in that region. And that was just between two calamities. And the other calamity that was there got buried in that calamity and is still alive, but is buried and basically unconscious. But that's one of the reasons why one of those regions has zero magic, is because the calamity that is anti-magic is stuck there.
Aha, okay.
So yeah, there's a lot of details that I wrote for no reason other than for my own sake.
But that could be really cool story hooks for later.
Yeah.
Even if, you never encounter these beings. Just to know what the nature of that was can be pretty interesting.
Yeah, and it's a great way to build a campaign off of it, because if you're, if you get hired by some rich guy to find precious metals and you go to this continent and you don't find precious metals, but instead you find like anti-magic minerals, not what he's looking for, but something far more important, it creates this whole nother overarching campaign, because now you found a mineral worth untold amount of gold, because all these other nations that you can use magic and you're the one nation that can't, but you have the one mineral that can stop that. That's worth you've created
we dip our arrows in it before we shoot. Forget a flaming arrow.
I can't channel anymore.
When you can watch the channeling of magic. So the details seem dumb to write them all out, because you're like, I'm never going to use this. But in the event that somehow you use it, it could change the face of the whole planet, and you can build out of nothing, basically.
What I would go to your point, write it down somewhere, be it on pen and paper or in a notebook, your computer. Write it down somewhere, because you're right. You may not use it today, but later, because rule number 2, players never do what you want them to. They're going to take a left turn somewhere and you go, oh, wait a minute, I had something that dealt with this. And you can flip your pages and find it and go, oh, this is what we need. And then you spend some time, flesh it out, and turn what you had as a cool idea, and now you turn into a whole other country or another magic item or something. That just a quick idea. Just write it down. I have pages and pages of stuff written everywhere. And notebook after notebook after notebook.
So, where in your timeline after that calamity are we? Are we, calamity plus 20, plus 200, plus 2,000?
Right around 600.
600 years after the last. Okay.
So we don't need to call a plumber to have some things fixed.
Right. Okay. So, where my players hopefully will be starting, hopefully soon, is 600 years after the most recent calamity. And so there's definitely religions that have cropped up from the minor gods and some of the major gods, because they're the only ones who are still mildly involved with the world. And I say mildly in all seriousness, because what happened to the world, when an entire continent goes up with just 2 calamities fighting, that's not even talking about the rest of the world, how it was impacted, they don't want that again, because billions died. You don't want to you want to wipe out what's left 600 years later. So that's where I'm kind of entering into my world.
So that's important to know, because we're not dealing with the immediate aftermath and dislocation, but we've had enough time for changes to establish. So we're in a new paradigm, but at the same time, it's not so far in the future that all of the ill effects have dispersed, right?
Yeah, so we're going to have some ill effects. We're going to have some ruins. that make for great stories to send adventurers in to go find this lost artifact that was in this temple, but it's all destroyed now, and then you got to find Indiana Jones and his buddies to go dig it out.
Right.
So there's a lot of that possibility as well.
Yeah, and the reason I wanted to place it after a second calamity is because if it was the first calamity, elves lived for a very long time. There's gonna be a lot of memory of like, oh hey,
yeah.
remember those 6 huge creatures that rocked the world?
Yeah.
There's a lot of old or
Sure.
long living creatures. So I wanted after the second calamity because that kind of excludes some of the
Right.
older knowledge already, and then it excludes that newer old knowledge. And now there's, so it kind of keeps breaking it apart to where less and less is remembered. And so even some of those really old, long living races are gone by now. And the few that do remain might remember, oh yeah, I remember there was these 2 giant creatures that fought one time in this one area, but they wouldn't have known who they were because the first calamity already knocked those guys out of knowledge.
Right.
Now it's just gods and minor gods, and some of them are out of knowledge now. So
Well, let me get this in here. Star Cop, I sent one here. He used the plane of air to explain a floating continent. A dragon god opened up the sky to take the dragon gods to a better place.
Mm-hmm.
Hey, I'm with you already.
yeah.
Well, when he ripped open the sky to the plane of air, the residue from the plane made this landmass rip itself out of the ground. So that's going to cause a calamity, but then you're going to have a place that's either floating in the air or even taken to the element plane of air. That sounds doable. You could do that.
I did something similar to that to have this king try to avoid a calamity. In the Faerun timeline, there was a time where magic stopped working, and this guy had a floating city, and he had a premonition that magic was going to stop working. Well, his whole entire city and continent would come crashing to the ground. So he took the whole floating mountain island now and folded it into the Shadow Veil. So
Yeah.
He's not anywhere technically. So then magic stops working and he's fine.
All right.
Yeah, it had its own
And
side
I
effects.
came back a couple hundred years later, and that's part of my campaign.
So the other thing about that Spelljammer was kind of interesting, where the sun was not a sun, but a very gigantic portal to the elemental plane of fire.
Oh,
And so in Spelljammer, you could take a Spelljammer ship, go over to the sun with the appropriate protections, and see all these interesting fire creatures just having a good old time.
Like Hipprees hanging out.
Yeah.
They're sitting on the sun.
It's like, oh yeah, I've got a beach house, assuming there was a beach on the sun, but-
It's a beach in front of the lake of magma.
yeah.
so
Nice day, ain't it, Bob?
who
Kind of cloudy sky.
because they've all been incinerated. But so certain things like that can be quite interesting, particularly when you're dealing with cosmological and things like that. We talked a little bit about some of the governments that you had. So let's get into commerce and trade. How they're at this point after the calamities and the world has reestablished itself to a point. What does commerce and trade and some of those things look like that keep the world working, keep it spinning? At this
Did you
point?
get into any details like on this one floating island? They just don't have Jello, but this other place they make Jello by the wagon load.
Yeah.
So we can trade it with them and make money.
So there was a lot of thought that had to go into trade on this for me, for a couple reasons. One, because there's an entire continent that doesn't have magic. It kind of looks at magic as bad. However, magic is useful. So would they trade for magic tools? Or how about magic armor? Would it still be useful?
To what level do they exclude it from their society?
Right. So you have to take into account the culture, when thinking of who they would trade with or why they would trade with them. So there's a lot. I worked really hard on trade and also on why they would have resources where that other ones didn't. So for instance, the continent where no one is born with magic, there's a lot of magic soaked up into the ore there. So there's a lot of magic ore on the continent that has no magic.
Well, yeah, so it's not free floating; it's all trapped in the earth.
Yeah,
sort of thing.
Exactly.
Okay.
So they have an overabundance of magic ore, which is highly desired by magic users for tools, weapons, rings, clothes, armor, name a thing, right? So they have a lot of trade, and they kind of control it and can say, oh well, if you want it, you're gonna pay.
Right.
Space Cop here is suggesting that it might be part of the black market in that city.
Oh,
Yeah, black markets for sure.
Yeah.
yeah.
So there's a lot. So I had to take into account the countries and their culture and who they were at war with or not, or who they got along with or not.
We've seen in other things, particularly the Dragonlance guide was very good about major and minor exports by region.
Mhm.
Did you do anything along those lines as a starting point?
Yes. So I knew the continent with no magic was going, and if nothing else, was going to have a high amount of technology,
Right.
firearms, steam engines,
Right.
blimps, dirigibles, so they're going to have things that they could use. So those things they could trade
Mhm.
very easily. And because other people who don't have magic want to even the playing field with a pistol, they're going to have to get it from the best makers.
Sure.
Right. So
Gotta get the real McCoy.
yeah, exactly. So you start with what you know that they're going to be good at. So for instance, I have one nation that is completely devoid of magic, so it's high technology. I have another nation that is very connected to magic.
Mhm.
Like almost anyone in the nation can use magic. There's few that are really good at it, but pretty much anyone can tap into it.
Right.
And so for them, their trade is high in magic things, magic imbued rings,
Mhm.
necklaces, because lots of magic users. That's what they use. That's how they build. That's how they transport. That's that's their whole culture is built around magic.
Yeah.
And so for their major exports, they're exporting anything imbued with magic. For their major exports on the island that has no magic,
Mhm.
their major export is technology.
Sure.
So, and then of course, they have their different foods that are in the regions and their different minerals. Like I said, magic minerals are higher in some areas or don't exist in others.
Right.
So they have to import. So then you have to find, well, who has it?
Mhm.
So
Right, you've always been really good when we've had our different conversations regarding commerce, particularly when it comes to island nation and sailing and those sorts of things.
Mhm.
What considerations do we have for trade, particularly transport and security? Because we've played that character oftentimes where we get to be a caravan guard, and that's how we move the party from A to B and have a problem along the way and start to really unfold our story. It's a little different on the sea.
It's a lot different on the sea. If we can go back and just look at history, the goods that they would carry in a ship, a lot of them would be salted meats because it has to keep for a long period of time. Because traveling in a ship, it can be fun, but it's not very fast. Trade goods would be anything from jewels that can be traded and carried a great value in a small, compact space. Firearms and black powder were very valuable in that day and age. Everybody wanted them. Only a few people knew how to make them. Food, especially fruits and fresh fruits and vegetables, because your pirates on the sea suffered from a vitamin C deficiency known as scurvy, that bad enough could be lethal. So some of the things that they did then at history, you could apply that type to yours. If they're in a sailing vessel going from place to place, if it's a short trip, you're going to have everything from food for your crew, fresh water, because seawater can't be drunk,
or rum.
or rum. So the Spanish and English would go down to the Caribbean, and they would get rum. Rum was made. It was a cheap commodity made from the leftovers of molasses. So they would cut down the sugar cane, make molasses for a variety of things, and the leftover mess they would be made into rum. So rum originally in the 1600s was a very black, not very, by today's standard, nobody would want to drink it probably. But it was actually used as a part of the pay of the sailors. They were rationed anywhere from 1, 2, or 3 cups a day. So they would have water, but they wanted that ration of rum. So a way to keep guys in line, if you were acting up on the boat, you didn't get your rum today. You didn't get your rum for a week. I see how you like going around this crazy ship out here in the middle of a hurricane sober. So on top of their pay, when they get to a port, then they would get, their silver for working. So that rum also was a trading commodity because liquor, who doesn't want it, right? So food, fresh fruit, especially fresh water, and then any commodities that are unique to that country where you're coming from. So in Spain and England, a lot of times there were firearms, and they would go back from places in China and India full of silk of all kinds of colors and food that was unique to where they were at. But in your islands, you have everything from unique food items to trade goods.
Yeah.
So are they sailing in a slow boat, or you got another?
So there are some versions of air type ships, but they're very rare. And most of them are actually from the nation that has no magic, and they use steam or fire, like we would with blimps or whatever, to transport stuff over the air. But the rest of them, it's all by sea.
Wow. So what about the floating cities?
So the floating cities and those islands, they actually have ships powered by magic.
No zip lines.
No zip lines.
One.
And so they use magically powered ships, and those ships, when they want to trade with the rest of these islands or the rest of the nations that are on the world, they will bring their flying ships down to sea level and then sail to those locations.
So Spelljammers or something different?
Similar to Spelljammers, but not quite.
Okay.
Sounds
Similar
more like Final Fantasy's 14 airships, where they're all like
Sort of,
air aspected crystals to make the regular boat go into the air.
Right. Yeah. It's very similar to that.
So your trade vessels are going to have anything and everything from precious gold, different metals, anything that it would be considered a exportable commodity.
Exotic and
valuable.
regional animals.
Yes.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Lemurs for sale, that kind of stuff.
Lemurs, cattle, horses. A lot of ships coming to the New World actually had ships and which had sheeps and pigs, chickens. All those had to come across the ocean to get here.
Yeah.
Because the American Indian didn't have sheep and pigs and cows and chickens.
Well, and that's one of the things. One of my nations has a very large forest that has a whole bunch of weird creatures and magical creatures and undead and stuff. And if you're wanting to experiment with magic or wanting to experiment with new resources, like what happens if I use an undead bone in this spell, right? You have to get it from somewhere, and this forest, for whatever reason, spawns these things at an unholy rate. I'm not explaining how it happens or why or any of that, but those are commodities that are traded. Yeah, I went into stupid details on trades. I had to. I got weird governments. I had to do something with the trade. So yeah, there's lots of stuff when it comes to trade, and I think it's important to know commerce only if you think your players are going to be interested in commerce, or if you are really wanting to know what sells where in your world. Because if you go to a village with 15 people, their commerce is not going to include the holy sword of dragon slaying. It's not going to happen. It's not there. Now that's not to say you can't find unique things in villages, because you never know what that village is now built upon, depending on your world structure. But it's not a thing that you're going to go up to Bob at the shop and get it from him.
Well, the other thing that's I like to do with commerce is when you have your larger cities and you get to see those exotic wares.
Mm-hmm.
Like, yeah, okay, I have meat pie all the time, but that's an orange, and I haven't seen one of those outside of picture books.
Yeah.
Yep. Those sorts of things can be really interesting to show the world without having to go to the rest of the world.
Right.
Breathing life into your setting through context again.
Star Cop makes a good point here. He says, "Don't forget the rats."
Yeah.
Oh, man.
Because all your commerce ships, if they have anything on it, it's going to have rats on it.
Dysentery,
I tried to
no.
show like the flavor of the region with the currency. So like when my party goes to Ravenloft and they want to go buy something, they're like, "Yeah, I want to buy this thing, and I have this much gold." I'm like, "Well, that's cool. How much silver do you have?"
Yeah.
Like, I don't care about gold. All right, this is Ravenloft. There's vampires and werewolves and zombies. I want your silver.
Yeah.
Did you have multiple different currency styles based on?
So I wanted them to be able to go to any continent and at least be able to exchange gold for the type of currency they use, because like for our society, the money that we use now is no longer silver notes.
Right.
If you look at our history of currency, we no longer have silver notes. We just have dollars.
Yeah.
But if you were to take that and go to some of these other smaller countries that are still using
Physical, physical version of
What is it, Dubai? They have gold vending machines. You put like $20 bill in, you get a piece of gold out.
yeah.
Yeah, but that's Dubai.
Yeah,
I mean,
but I'm saying it's still
everybody has a Ferrari there, and that's the beater car you drive.
even the cops have it.
Even the
but they have a different culture with a different standard, right?
Yeah.
So you
Yes.
got it somewhere different.
Yeah, so I wanted to be able to say, oh, well, you have gold from this nation. It's still gold, so it still has value, but maybe it doesn't have as much in this nation. So when you go there and you're like, oh, I have this much gold, they're like, oh, well,
Right.
if you're trading in gold and not in, for instance, in one of my nations that's very magic heavy, gold is not super important to them. But if you have magic ore, or if you have some of their currency that is based on magic ore,
Right.
great. So if you come in and you have 200 gold, you can exchange it, but it's going to be worth 20 magic.
Right.
One of the
Basically.
trading monetary standards that came, I don't want to say came out of the Crusades, but it started occurring a lot during and in the Crusades. The merchants that would make those journeys, I mean, you're talking thousands of miles on camel from up in northern Europe all the way down to the Holy Land. They would carry gold and silver rods, but basically like a wooden pencil, but it was a specifically an amount of silver or gold by weight. And so when they went to one place, trading within merchants of not necessarily a guild, but guys that they made a network with, they knew that 3 of these silver rods had X value, and I could trade. And the silver was valuable to you, the gold was valuable to you, so it started to become the monetary exchange, and it became among the merchants. Anybody else is trying to eke out a living, everything was bartered. So I need a shovel, I have this to trade, and you're like, well, is the shovel more valuable to you, or is this chicken more valuable to you? Well, I need the chicken. And so they would barter a lot. Money among the peasantry of everybody else in the world, pretty much regardless of where you lived, you had a couple coins in your family. And I see it every once in a while in a movie, like, well, how much money do we have? Well, we got $12.
Yeah, all 8 people standing in the room, one room.
Yeah, we have $8, and they have a cigar box with all their money because everybody else is living on that. So a lot of times when we talk about money and currency and trade and all that kind of stuff, depending on your whole economy of that land, is it a rich country? Is it an average country? Is it a very poor country? And I show this a lot when adventurers coming out of a dungeon make their way to the tavern and drop a bag of gold on the table. Bring me beer. And like, okay. You just dropped $10,000 in the economy of a village that they live on 25 silver a year.
Yeah. Tomorrow bread costs 4 gold, mother.
Yeah. You just completely ruined. And so not only did you just drop all this money in the economy, but now every thief in the county has just heard that bag hit the table.
Yeah.
All the barmaids in there are trying to figure out how they can upcharge everything that's about to sell you.
Yeah.
The bartender just like, you guys need all this and a horse. Yeah, and it's going to cost you that. They're going to, the price of everything just went up. Yeah. So when you're doing your economy, and there's a thousand things to take into consideration.
There's a lot into economy between whether the country is rich or poor, and also what they value. Because if you look, some countries that are real small that don't need vehicles nowadays care nothing about cars or oil.
No,
they care nothing about it.
You're not going to sell a Nissan Rogue to an Amish guy.
Yeah, exactly. So it's important to know what they value. And so I actually have a nation in here that has no currency. Okay. So if you brought currency, they'd be like, "Great, thanks. What is it?"
Yeah, what can I use it for? Is gold worth it?
Has,
That's a tremendous concept. If you look back at history, when the white man showed up and trying to do trade with the Indians, he pulls out a wad of cash or a bunch of gold, and the Indian's like, "What good is that? I can't eat it."
Yeah.
Yeah, I can't plant it, eat it.
I can't eat
build
it.
With it.
It doesn't keep us warm.
It's not going to shelter us. Yeah. What good is that? And then they're like, "Oh, hey, you want some of these plastic beads?
Yeah.
We'll take your whole island. I'll give you this box of beads."
Yeah.
Sounds fair.
Yeah.
So it sounds like you did, a tremendous amount of work. Not only with the particulars of the items, but did you go into like logistic chains? So from here it has to go. So I want to fly to LA. I have to make a stop in Chicago. I don't know why. Delta says I have to.
So
it's just right over there.
Well, and if you think about it, certain merchants aren't beholden to any one country, which makes it a little bit interesting with trade routes. Yeah. Because if you are beholden to that country's trade, that changes how the routes work. For instance, the kingdom that has no magic and the kingdom that has a lot of magic don't really get along. They trade out of necessity. That's it.
Sure.
So those trade ships are few and far between and only when necessary. But that other nation, without any magic, trades with lots of other people because of their technology. And so the trade routes are totally different. And a non-associated trader will go anywhere there's money to be had. Like, oh, well, I got this for cheap here, but it's really expensive in this country. That's where I'm going next.
Now, as part of this too, did you establish guilds or other formal trade associations as part of the different countries?
Yeah, in fact, the only guilds I actually have
East Empire Church.
in my world are trading guilds and like, I'm trying to think of the word, kind of like a black market.
Okay, so
That's basically it. Are those two? I didn't want to have any like adventurer guilds, and I didn't want any like assassin guilds because assassin is a job title. That is not a guild.
yeah.
And I didn't even have a thieves guild as like a major thing. That falls under black market. They're stealing items and people to sell. That's black market. That's a thieves guild. That's what that is.
Right. So you've got individual brokers who are either good at it or in the stockade.
Right, so, yeah, and there could be 20 or 30 people working for a particular broker, but it's still the black market.
For sure. So, and that's, that all goes into commerce.
Yeah.
But those, again, are things, too, that when you come across it, speak to the larger living world.
Yeah.
So
Nice.
we hit on it a little bit. I think we're ready to finally dive into your magic versus technology. And so this is one of the things that we've highlighted as we've gone through a lot of different world settings. For example, we tend to classify Faerun as a high fantasy, high magic. When we classify Greyhawk, we tend to speak of it in high fantasy, medium to low magic. And that talks about power and prevalence. So for you, based on the calamity and the history of the world setting, you've got certain areas that can go one way or the other, it sounds like.
Yes. Yeah, so some areas are not, there are either no magic users allowed. So like if you were to use magic in those areas, you'd immediately be...
Is it considered a crime in those areas?
Yeah, it's like witch burning type stuff. Yeah, it's
right.
It's,
Well, you can build a bridge out of them.
Yeah. Are they lighter than a duck? Anyways. So yeah, there are some areas that have no magic and it's bad and it's outlawed. There are other areas that wild magic, like those
the sorcery type wild magic.
yeah, perfectly fine. But if it's divine magic, there's a problem because they worship wild things, not right. So it changes their viewpoint depending on where you're at. So yeah, there's lots of magic, and I consider my world high magic. But yeah, there's areas where there's no magic users are even born. So then it's like, well, is it high magic or is it not?
Well, so the setting overall would probably be a medium to high magic.
Yeah.
Then it varies by region.
Right. There's spots in Faerun that have wild magic spots and dead magic spots where, like, even if you are a caster of great potential, you could go to these areas and not be able to cast even a simple cantrip.
Yeah. And so where you can cast magic pretty much anywhere in my world, the problem is some places will frown upon it and they will hunt you down as an enemy of the state, effectively. So
it can be pretty brutal then.
Yeah.
Now the lore, some of your history informs some of these decisions. When we've talked about technology, we've gone as far as like dirigibles and things. So we talked about like ironworks, early industrial revolution levels of technology. Maybe a little earlier than that, kind of a mixed steampunk thing on your tech?
Yeah, it's closer to steampunk. Some of the weapons might favor or lean towards like Old West style, but most everything sticks around steam type or coal type engines.
Okay,
that's where it's at.
More flintlocks and less revolvers?
Right,
But
yeah.
Okay.
Not that revolvers don't exist, but they're very rare. They're for the rich class that does not want to die.
They're in very high-end technology at this point.
Yeah, they're expensive if you can find them, and they're very far and few between.
So the technologically advanced nation, what do their ships look like?
So most of their ships are still pretty Victorian style, the galleons, and so a lot of the ships around the world follow that same type of style. There's a few nations that have different looking ships that you might see lean more towards the Oriental style, and some that might lean towards the Viking type style.
But still sailing ships.
Yes,
so we don't have like not a steam powered ship or a big paddle boat or something like that.
Right, not quite. There again, if there are those, that's very far and few between because that's technology that uses a little bit more engineering than some of the other stuff.
There's only one paddle boat and it sits just inside of international water, so you can go do gambling.
Yeah, there you
go. There are some, but it's far and few between. The majority of the ships are sailing ships.
Okay. So on the magic side of things, I know Anime 5e probably has a different take on this sort of thing. How much of magic, as we understand it from D&D 5e, crosses over?
So it's up to you. They give you rules for using magic two different ways, effectively. Maybe a little bit more if you wanted to really dive into it, but that was not much.
Sure.
So the The first way is just straight up spell lists.
Okay.
You can use any class in there that uses magic. You can have them use the spell list associated to what the book kind of guides you.
Okay.
The other option is you can use magic points, and you can still use class specific spells, or you can just kind of go ham with it and be like, whatever you want,
So things like, classics like Fireball, Lightning Bolt, Cloud Kill, and Polymorph are still going to show up in your world setting.
Yep, absolutely.
Are there any things like spells or magic effects that are specific to the 5e, the anime 5e, that you were surprised to see or would be interesting to know?
So they didn't add any spells. They encourage, of course, modifying spells. But one of the things that they show is the change in magic overall. So one of the things they talk about when it comes to magic is that the spells are cool, but the effects are cooler.
Sure.
So they talked about how there's not really a lot of time magic used in D&D 5e, which is a shame because time magic is one of the coolest magics ever. But it's very hard to balance.
Yeah, so we had Chronomancers running with us in 2nd edition, and it was very difficult.
Yeah.
Because you're like, oh no, natural 20, Bob died. He goes, rewind. And you're like, well, what the flip?
So that was one of the things they talked about, was trying to find a way to balance it. And so a lot of my players have played D&D pretty regularly, so I'm not super worried about them, having any disrespect going on or having any of that going on, but I think it's very difficult with this if you're not using just the D&D spells. One of the ways they described it is one of the players was trying to break through a door, get through a door that was locked. But they didn't have a rogue. So the mage used time magic to rust the lock and let him through. Magic is not a spell, it's an effect. And so they were trying to describe how the magic he's using would be an effect in this situation.
Okay.
And so they were trying to show you how to expel points on a spell's effect instead of that spell level. And it was interesting.
From that perspective, did it inform any of your decisions around magic or the world creation?
It did. So I love the spell list and how it's done on D&D because it's very easy to follow, and there's no like, well, I don't know if that should work like that or not. But being able to use spell points or magic points to cast spells, I think is really cool, because then things like, well, normally I could slow my enemy. Is there any way I could speed up time and rust that lock?
Right.
And be like, oh, well, yeah, let's pull 30 points out of your magic pool, and I would say you could rust the lock enough that it would break when you turn the handle and get through the door. It gives more freedom to the players of being able to not have to fit certain roles to get certain missions done, or they can still finish those roles in other ways, So it made it interesting, because then you didn't need a rogue. You had a mage who could use the effect of a spell on an item rather than on just a person in combat. And so it made it more interesting, which I'm sure you could do with a 5e spell and just do that effect if you wanted to. But I like the idea of expending magic points for another reason. The magic system in there is if you expel all of your magic points, then your health starts to deplete.
Right.
And I thought that was interesting, and I had never even considered that, because then if you're really desperate and you're in a fight moment where it's like, this is the end, either I'm dying or he's dying, and you need that extra oomph, you can cast a 2nd 9th level spell at the cost of your HP, and you may die, but then so will he, and you save the world, that type of thing.
Sure.
And it gives that huge grand moment that a lot of players wish they could be a part of. And I liked that. So I decided I'm going to try and see if I can run the game using the point system rather than a spell list system.
That'd be kind of cool. And Troy, we've seen that in the past too, with different, like you have a mana point system that you developed where you can dip into HP.
You can.
3rd edition had a bloodcaster.
Yeah.
And then we've seen certain things where Necromancer will go, let me borrow that. Ha! Yeah. And you're like, oh, I kind of feel sick. But that guy got lightning bolt. So
oh, screw that guy. Oh.
Yeah. Right. So yeah, definitely in the times that we've seen that in parties and things like that, it has made for an interesting character when they start swapping those sorts of things around. And to interesting gameplay moments, particularly in the clutch.
It creates a dynamic scene of sorts, and if it involves more than one character, it gets even more. Because if you have your cleric who has no spell slots left, they're useless. But if you're using a point system, you can go, well, I will use however much of my HP I need to heal my ally who's down. I have nothing else to give, but I will still heal him. It allows them to dig into that character role, and I love that type of roleplay where someone's willing to go all in on the role they want to play.
Absolutely.
Troy, you got some notes on magic versus technology?
Magic versus technology.
Yeah.
Oh, for his?
Well, just generally, as
Oh, in
we're
general?
creating worlds here. So obviously Ben has got sort of like a medium to high magic overall setting.
The overall, yes.
Yeah.
He took it to an extreme. Where this one country
I
is
often do that.
is more tech.
Well, you
and
play Go. All you know is little white baubles or black baubles.
You're right.
Yeah. So he took it to the extreme where this one country is mostly tech and magic is shunned. In another country, I think it's a good thing that they're not right next to each other. This country is all magic, and it's not that they shun technology. It's just that they're so heavy in magic.
They don't need it.
They don't need it. It's like they change a baby's diaper. It's like very Mary Poppins.
Yeah.
Everything just happens around her, and the broom is cleaning the floor and all this kind of stuff.
Yeah.
And it's just so natural to them that I think it would be a fun place to visit. I don't know if I'd want to stay because if somebody has that high level of magic, if you were to upset them and they had an army, you're looking at an army casting lightning bolt and fireballs. Whereas the other army of all tech, they're going to come to the battlefield with some very scary machinery.
Yeah.
So I think there's potential there. And like I said, it's a good thing they're not right next to each other because their ideologies are so opposed that everything from religion to politics would be so diametric that they just would not get along.
I did that because of the Pirate Nation. I wanted to create a reason why privateers and pirates existed, because in history, the reason pirates existed for us is they were privateers. I have my own ship. They hired me to work for them as a military force because they were short on ships because the English are dirtbags and so are the Spanish. So we got to do something, And then they became pirates because they're like, you aren't paying me enough. I'll just steal what I want. And so it kind of made that Pirate Nation because we had people on boats that used magic and they're like, I don't know why we're fighting these people. It makes no sense. They aren't paying me enough to kill random people I don't know across the ocean. And so it made it to where privateers showed up and pirates. So there's this Pirate Nation that has magic and guns and they'll do whatever they want.
So here, let me give you a very simple, why do you have pirates? Do you have ships?
Yeah.
You're going to have pirates.
Yeah.
Because everybody on the ship, it's like that old quote, why did the guy is asked, why did he rob banks? Is what's where the money was. So if there's a ship on the ocean, it's got money in some form or fashion.
Yeah.
They're going to have everything from treasure.
The ship itself.
The ship itself.
They're either going to have goods for sale
or
money from the goods that they sold.
Right.
Or if you're really into it, people for sale. I mean, you've got options.
There's that. Well, a lot of pirates, not only would they take people and put them in some form of slavery, but they would recruit. They had very pressing ways to get you to recruit. You want to walk the plank or do you want to work for me now? Let me think about my options. Yeah, I think I'll work for you. It sounds like a great opportunity.
Yeah.
So if you got ships, you're gonna have pirates, and it's same with everywhere. If you have a road, you're gonna have bandits. You have a town, you're gonna have bandits. So the bad guys are always gonna be there. So always gonna have some form of clashing going on that you need to defend yourself from. So
I just wanted to make sure my pirates had cannons.
for sure.
of course they would. They may not have like 30 of them on a ship, but even one can be very devastating.
Yeah.
StarCop 3 asks a very quick question here about magic versus tech in the world of Planescape.
Yeah.
And I never really considered it, but yes, Planescape can be as drastic as your two nations of magic heavy and tech heavy.
Well,
because there's the moderns.
Well, right, moderns are the ones that stand out, but they're an intelligent mechanical creature.
Contrivance.
So they're not a construct like we'd see in Eberron war machines.
But they do have some tech like steam engines and other boilers and different things.
Right, because for their culture and the way that they operate.
They still have magic and stuff too. So they have a steam
have magic
that is on floating rails.
Yes, so they have the modern city probably is one of the better ways of showing extreme tech, extreme magic together.
Yeah,
because they're brought to life. They're not a steam engine construction where they're walking around freely. They are a living mechanical thing. And
it's like a washing machine plus necromancy.
Oh yeah,
it's very interesting.
It's very interesting creatures. But I love Planescape, StarCop 3. Please come back when we do our Planescape show because I'm really going to nerd out then.
He was hanging out with us on our Discord the other night. That's Star. So
that's Star?
Yeah.
It's not spelled the same.
Because it's a different platform.
Star, he knows about Planescape.
So yeah, when you deal with Planescape, it largely draws on a lot of the fantasy lore. So, the seven heavens and the nine hells and those sorts of things that we understand. The abyss is just a bleak place that no one should ever go ever.
Yeah,
So
yeah, your vacation getaway, it's not.
It's stuck so bad the demons don't even want to be there.
and that's the thing is you for Planescape, it's still a fairly high fantasy setting, which tends to mean a lower technology level.
So he just reminded me from Babylon 5, they had techno mages. They actually used technology and magic together to create things.
Well, they use technology to simulate magic.
Yeah.
Okay.
They were very mysterious.
So I forget whose code it is, but the code is any sufficiently advanced technology is
Would appear as magic.
is indistinguishable from magic or something along those lines.
Yeah.
And so, teleportation, right? From Star Trek. Is that magic?
Yeah.
Well,
Well,
there's a spell that can do it.
right. So again, as we're talking about magic and technology, those are things to keep in mind. And then Ben, of course, your execution has been very unique in that you've got sort of this dichotomy on a generally magic, medium to heavy magic, which is what we see by the D&D regular.
So here's a question for you, Ben.
Yeah.
Have you created any spells or technology specifically for your world setting because of this dichotomy that you have
Yes.
made? Yeah?
Yes.
What kind of spells?
So most of them are the spells that have gone awry for fun. So there may or may not be a giant black mist of undead.
Oh yeah, that's what we want.
Okay. Yeah.
Spells that have gone awry are the most fun. As far as technology goes, there are something I wouldn't say I invented them, but I've added in quite a few different things. Like I said, between some of the flying ships that technology wise and some of the steam ships, of course, some of the weapons and stuff, and there may or may not be some form of steam type mechs, but that's
There may or may not be.
Yeah. Question. So you have a super high magic society and a super high technology society, and then you have independent groups that are trying to get either or both. Would there be anything like? Would there be like an independent manufacturer like GE, right? They just make all kinds of stuff. Would they be making technology that involves magic, like a device that requires magic to operate?
Yeah. There's a couple different regions that I've put together on a couple different continents that have engineers working side by side with magic scholars to create dual options, basically.
Ooh.
So Magitech is something we've seen featured
I love magic.
a lot in Final Fantasy since 6. 6 was like really good, and then 14 with the Garleans showed that off again.
Well, and as a world builder and as a campaign builder, I wanted it to be a living world. And let's face it, we had in the real world, we have people that escaped Germany during World War II that came to the U.S. to share their wonderful secrets of how to make a second sun, and we used that very well. Same concept. People that are inventing things on this continent with no magic. I mean, how many questions do you have? Well, if I go to another continent, will I suddenly be able to use magic?
Oh yeah,
I know how to make guns. If I go to other countries, will they pay me more than here to make guns?
Or does this thing still work there?
Yeah.
Exactly. Does magic stop this machine from working?
Yeah.
Or vice versa?
Yeah. So you will find people who can make items like guns or other things on other continents. It's just, if you want the really good stuff, you're going to go, to the real McCoy.
For sure.
Yeah.
So there we go. Now, your Mist of Undead brings me to our.
Let's just skip that.
Well, never. So it does actually bring you, to Ravenloft, but to our monster types and other threats. We talked a little bit about your primordial, your calamities that have already ruined the world as it was known. This Mist of Undead. What are some of the other interesting, unique threats that you've been able to add to the world, either just because of your imagination or things that you were finally able to execute because of the Anime 5e changes?
So a lot of it is inspiration from other sources, and that's one of the things that I love. So Anime 5e gave me the option to create unique characters, both good and bad. And I got to the point where I could do that because I had all these notes from different characters. Like I'll listen to a song and be like, oh, that would be a cool like intro to a character or whatever. And it makes me think of a character. And so like the black smoke that's undead, it's just this cloud. The undead thrive in it for whatever reason, and they're dangerous and they move for some unknown reason. I'm not going to tell.
Yeah.
Um,
For a reason only you know.
yeah, and the same thing. There's that. There's a very large force on one continent that spawns creatures.
Yeah.
Wow, you know. So there's things like that, and it's a god of dragons basically that exists. I made one of those because dragons are dope, and it's in the name, so it has to be dope.
Right.
You know, when you're playing Dungeons and Dragons, there better be at least one really dope dragon.
Oh, there are several.
There are
several.
really cool ones, but I wanted my own. I wanted my own thing, and so I made like a dragon who's kind of basically a deity. He's ridiculously powerful, and he's a ruler of a particular area. I'm like, again, not getting in details. The Undercroft that I've got, the civilization that's down there has been there ever since the first calamity. So those people don't even know what happened to the top of the world.
Oh dang.
So there's
meteor falls and they had the broomstick. Keep her down up there.
I mean, so there's a whole group of different races under the earth that have never even seen what's happened up there. They don't even know what's going on.
Right.
So anyone that travels too far into the Underdark may or may not ever return because you don't know what they're like down there until you go. Yeah, I've been able to do a lot of interesting creatures and enemies with this, and I'm sure I could have added those in D&D 5e pretty easily. But it definitely, a lot of it started exploding more when I had this anime stuff because I was like, I can do anything. I've seen anime; they do some weird stuff. I can do cool stuff.
So to piggyback on that point, drawing from your inspirations when you are writing a world or even just writing a one-shot adventure, those inspirations can help inform your cool monster, your plot hook, your big disaster, whatever it happens to be. You know, we all borrow in the shared lore of things. Particularly when I run my sci-fi games, there's so much cool mecha and cybernetics, laser swords. I mean, you name it. There's just a million different things you can borrow, add, include, modify. And the same goes for unique creatures, different areas in your world setting, threats, allies, any number of things. So draw on those inspirations, and whether it makes it into the final product or not, if you think something's going to be cool, as we've talked about before, include it in your notes and see how you can use it. Or you may end up having to come back to it, like Troy said later, or earlier. You'll come back to it later. But Mr. Producer needs a pin.
I need to make a note for later.
No, he's like,
for instance, the UNT or the UNT purebloods. There, I have a third option, and it's like a demon type race that rules. It's a demon that's on the greater plane, and it rules one whole area.
Nice.
So yeah, you can make anything.
You can make anything.
Yeah, you just make it work is all you got to do.
So when it comes to monsters, Troy, did you have any input on different threats and things that you've seen work well when people have gone sort of outside the norm of the monster manual?
Well, going outside the net, I was wanting to ask him if he's made any races or monsters from scratch for this world setting.
Yeah. So I made my own version of Immortals.
Okay.
Which are a fun little lore piece. They kind of tie in all the history of the world to where the players are currently entering. And then vampires and werewolves are like in every fantasy setting, it seems like, and everybody loves a good dark tone.
Yeah.
So I spun my own lore on vampires and werewolves and how they function and work in the world. And then I have a half human, half something else race of humans. Again, part of the lore. I don't want to give it all away.
Yeah.
It's a tree man, isn't it?
Huh?
It's a tree man.
No. But they are a ruling faction of another continent. So they're like they think they're the pure ones.
Right.
You know? But it's so they're half human, half something else. Kind of like we have half orcs or half elves. It's like that, but something else.
Right.
Well,
Now,
so that comes to my mind more along the lines of like Tiefling, where they're
Yeah.
part demon and part something else, and they don't really care what. They just know that
yeah.
Tieflings.
Yeah.
So some of those things that you've created, are those going to end up potentially being player options for your characters, or things that at this point you were going to reserve for the world, since you're talking about an isekai style introduction?
Yeah, what I will probably do is save it for just my world, because I'm hoping for my players to pick races that they are either comfortable with or familiar with, to play those first. Because if you were given a choice of races when entering a new world, and you're like, I don't know what any of these are, but I recognize goblin, orc, elf, I'll pick one of those. That's kind of what I don't know anyone that'd be like, hey, I've never heard of this before, I'm gonna try that one.
We see them all the time.
Yeah.
I'm a turtle man.
That's true. That's fair. So I had no plans for them to try them out right away. And of course, vampire and werewolf aren't things that you are starting as. Those are things that happen to you. It's lycanthropy and vampirism, whatever. But yeah, so I was keeping those aside mostly for them to explore. I wanted them to see something new and explore something new.
Gotcha. I do want to mention, guys, if you have any questions for Ben of your own as it comes to your own world building or things that he's experienced, be sure to get those ready. Mr. Producer will grab those for us, and we'll make sure that while Ben is here today, we get your questions answered and get you some help on your own world building projects. I do want to say thank you also for being with us. So thank you. The other thing we got there, what's the next point there, Troy?
The next point?
Yeah.
It says wrap up and sign out.
You are one step ahead.
Oh. Well, we've been talking about lore.
Right. Well,
and different points of interest.
This is the other thing that I wanted to bring into this is we've been talking about all of it.
We have.
So, Troy, this was one of the things that you and I had a hard time with when we put our list together.
Yeah.
Well, because the discussion goes like, well, what, if we start here, then what next? He's like, well, this informs that, and it does.
It's a tangled web we weave when we do try to build a world setting.
Yeah.
Because you have this thing, it affects that. Example, the map.
Yeah.
One of the things we had discussion at Haven talking about just coming up with a map for your world or a country. Let's start with a village around a country. So I want to put the grasslands here. I want to put the forest bay over here, a river. Let's put an ocean. Here's some mountains. Here's a desert.
Yeah.
And we got into a big discussion. Well, the terrain is going to affect the weather, and the weather is going to affect what crops can grow.
And the people that are there.
And the people that are there. So let's say, you got the mountains, you got a river, and you got a forest, and you got mountains. So where are the dwarves going to live?
Grassland. Oh, wait, no.
Where are the elves going to live?
Yeah.
Okay, we're going to put up a fishing village. Let's do that by the ocean. So when you start building your map and you have your different terrain features, different races will typically migrate to those areas because that's where they choose to live. And your culture and your commerce and all these other things start tying in together. So if dwarves live here, what are they going to trade in? Well,
Ores.
gold. They're going to have your better smiths to make different items of steel. What are the elves going to trade in? Well, herbs and anything you can find in the forest, maybe types of food. What are the people in the fishing village going to trade in? Anything that comes from the ocean. So if you live out here in the mountains, have you even seen an octopus? So when you travel and you go to another village and you get to the village there by the ocean, you're like, wow, I've never seen this much water in one place at a time. It smells funny. That's really neat. And you go to the inn. I'll just have the special today at Barkeep, whatever that is. And he brings you a platter, a seafood platter, octopus and a piece of fish and a piece of that. Things you have never even seen.
Yeah.
That's an adventure in and of itself.
Yeah.
But,
Roll Constitution.
but you have trade and commerce. Immediately, things start popping under your head. These people live here, those people live there. They're going to trade in this typically.
Yeah.
But the odd things that come out are, if I'm going to have a unique race, I'm going to have unique monsters, where do they want to live and why? But again, it goes to all the different points. They're all tangled. You can't just say, oh, the people that live in this forest have this kind of government. Well, do they really? Because the people that live in the forest are going to be predominantly this one race, and predominantly they have this type of government, and they do this type of commerce. So it all ties together.
I just want to ask you, Ben, how many times did you make a decision somewhere and have to go back and change something else?
A lot.
Yeah.
I mean, it was a lot, and a lot of the reason why is because not everything has to be the way you think it should. For instance, dwarves, everyone, they're miners, they're in the mountains. But does that mean that they can't grow crops?
No,
or that they don't grow crops?
Right.
Right. And if they do grow crops, do they grow them outside of the mountain, or do they burr a hole in the top of the mountain and do raised bed gardens inside their cities? Like, what does it look like?
Or is it like some sort of cave fungus that?
Yeah,
like mosses and stuff like that.
yeah. So there's questions and ideas that'll pop into your head when you're thinking about stuff, and then you immediately should write it down, whatever it is, because it could fit perfect with what you want to build, or it may not fit at all. But then you can trash it, and it's up to you. And so, yeah, there's a lot of times I was going back and rewriting and changing this and adding that and removing that. So, like the empires are generally, ruled in such a way that there's usually a line of succession, and normally it's only male or whatever.
Sure.
And so when you're looking at empires that are built that way, that also have because empires often include a senate of some sort,
right?
Those empires are now a whole different scale when you change it, depending on the type of ruler. Is he a ruthless ruler? Is he a kind ruler? So yeah, I was constantly rewriting stuff based upon what else was going on in the world and what I thought that empire would react to based on who the leader was, because that's who decides. He's the ruler.
Right. Do you have any nations that don't know about each other?
Yeah.
Oh yeah.
Yeah.
Oh, that could be fun.
Yeah. I did a stupid amount of work.
We told you.
Yes.
We told you.
If you're gonna build a world, know that it is. If you're gonna build it all before you plan it, know that it's gonna be forever. But you can build it while you're playing it. It is completely possible. You can start with a simple concept, and it will explode very fast, especially because players. It's taking me a lot longer to build it because it's just my brain trying to create this stuff. But when you have other people throwing out ideas because they're like, I want to leave this island, and you're like, I don't know where the frick they're going. There is now an island to the east that you're going to.
It forces you to do something else. So in the D&D campaign, I wrote chapters 1 through 3, and then I stopped writing because at that point in my campaign, there was enough free choice that the players could be like, all right, I want to go here and go do this thing.
Yep.
And then like, all right, well now in my campaign, that's the next chapter.
Yeah, and the one suggestion that players always give that DMs love to hear is, this would be a really bad time for this to happen. And you go,
you're right. It would be.
You're right. It would be. What was that again?
This thing happens.
I love the Mr. Bean meme I've seen where he's over there and he's cheating on that test.
Yeah.
But it's the player who's taking notes about everything that's going on in the campaign. Me, the game master, taking notes about it.
Yeah. Oh yeah. So yeah, I think there's been a lot of stuff that I've had to rewrite or redo. And if I were to point out the major things that I think are super important if you're wanting to build a world, the best things to start with is a handful of beans and a piece of paper. Just get on it. If you're interested in doing it, just start it. Even if you're not interested in running a campaign right away, just start doing it.
Don't sell those beans short. Those are magical beans. They made an entire world.
Yeah. So just start. I mean, you will build as you're going, and there's tons of people with resources. These guys are fantastic. They've given me a ton of resources and a ton of ideas. And I legit would go to their round tables and I'd sit down, pull out my pen and paper, and we'd just talk. And then as I think of something, great idea. Great idea. That was totally my idea. Shut up.
Starcop makes a note here. The story driven is like the story of stone soup.
Yeah, it could be pretty tough.
I gotta give it the beans. Stone bean soup.
Give the beans.
And I think with the storytelling, for me, the way I built my world was because I wanted my players to tell a story. I will give them the world. I will make it come alive for them, but then I want them to write the story that they want to play. Yeah. Because if I write all the details of an entire campaign all the way through and I build my whole world and I do all of that, they're never going to do what I want. Never. So
rule number 2.
Well laid out plan will never survive contact with the enemy.
Yeah.
So the other thing that's kind of interesting, how much new writing do you anticipate you'll do as you start to play?
I expect a lot. Despite all the work I've done on the pantheons and the trade and the towns and the rulers and the families and the dukedoms and the blah blah blah. There's going to be more because the players are always going to do something I did not plan for
Or they're
did not
going to
expect.
ask you a question that's like, I don't have that. And
Yeah.
we've seen this even running from pre-generated material.
Mhm.
So you go through and you're like, okay, we're in this region. I've got this module. We're doing these things. And then somebody's like, hey, what about this symbol? You're like, it's nowhere to be found. I got to figure this one out.
I was
And then
running.
you just say, it's this thing. And then 4 months later, after you forgot about it, they're like, hey, what about that? You're like, son of a bitch.
Handed Sam.
Where did you get that? Where was that?
Right. So, yeah, that is kind of the part of the fun of being a game master, though. Whether it's a world like Faerun or Greyhawk, or a world of your own creation, you will always be breathing life into that world as the situation evolves, right? If you're going into a major war, cosmological calamity, just the bandits that are harassing a small farming village, all those sorts of things. As you breathe life into this world, you'll come up against things that weren't mentioned or weren't planned for, but you'll need to come up with on the fly. And it's really important, in particular with your world, as you're writing these things, to make notes of those and add them in, because you'll end up like most game masters. 4 months later, you'll have your one annoying player ask you a question that you forgot to put a sticky note in something.
Yeah. Oh, yeah. There will
One
always
guy
be.
that's taking notes.
Ad-libbing is super important to be able to do, but only if you can keep notes directly after ad-libbing.
Yes, especially if you make up a name on the spot for this merchant that they bought something from, because when they come back to that town, hey, I want to find Bob because he had a really good deal on this stuff.
Be like,
You're like, who?
oh, yeah. Got myself in trouble there. That's been fun.
That's why I have one merchant, and outside of all of his shops is a magical welcome mat that when you step on it, it teleports him to the magical shop. So when you walk in, he's there.
That sounds great in theory, but can you imagine how ticked off that guy would be?
Well,
Like shopping for himself.
Well,
Like, oh, I love these onions.
the thing is, like, I try to make him like the merchant from video games. Like, you just big boss, you're on this island, and then you walk in, you just killed the boss, and you walk through the door, and there's the guy. Like, how did you even get here?
Like Greg the garlic farmer?
Yeah, like one of those.
Right there.
He's the one merchant. Like, so he's got this magical thing, so he steps on it, and it lets him know that there's somebody at the shop in this location, so he teleports there.
Hi, greetings, brave adventurer.
Yeah. They did that in Resident Evil 4.
Yeah.
They're like, okay, this is a giant mutated troll monster that's 20 feet tall, and I've got a knife and 9 rounds in my pistol to... And then you go through and you do this half-hour long fight, and then you're like, okay, that was good. Brush myself off, go through the door. The dude's standing right there.
Yeah.
Like, this door was locked behind a troll.
We're
Like,
in the sewers. I just killed a giant alligator. How are you here?
and it's always the same guy. So, yeah, that's what he's done. It's hilarious. But again, mentioning where everything's tied together. So you will put your map together. You will decide which nation or kingdom should go where. And then as you start to populate it, you may need to go back and adjust your map. Or as you get things more settled and you start dealing with cultural influences across, you're like, so while we presented things in an order, it doesn't necessarily mean it's one and done. You will always, as you add to one category, need to adjust another category. And it gets more complicated because you do it per culture, per race, per country, per region of the world, per planet as you break out into this. It does end up being quite a lot. And this is where, as older or players of older editions, we really appreciated the box sets for Dark Sun and Greyhawk and Planescape, because it gave us a couple years worth of development that we didn't have to do.
Yeah.
Well, something I keep coming back to is the random world development chart in the original Spelljammer.
Yeah,
Cool.
they've got a for those folks that like to have randomly generated tables, Gwydion absolutely loves random tables. They were a big feature of earlier editions, but it took a lot of that work off of you. So you're like, okay, I'm going to go and put some stuff together, roll some dice, and then I've got a planet of this size with this atmosphere, whatever it was, and you can just now I've got a
especially if
region.
you're trying to make a whole solar system. It's super easy.
Well, what's nice about some of those earlier charts is that they were already tailored. Like, so I know that I'm going to have my adventurers in this dark forest. So I don't go grab the one for the rock terrain. I grab the forest terrain, and that way I get bad guys and monsters and challenges appropriate to the region and that sort of stuff.
Yeah.
You don't get random roll generation tables though when you sit down with beans and a blank piece of paper.
Yeah.
So if you find some out there that can help you, don't use any tool that you feel that you need to be able to expedite your writing process and give you a leg up on things. Even if you go and you generate 6 different cultures, you'll still need to go and refine them from there. But using generators like that can really take a lot of the headache out of the process.
Yeah. And you don't have to have all the details either. Like I have a detailed note of every village that's in one nation. I have a note of the population of the total nation. I have I have a ton of notes that may or may not ever be useful to me. So sometimes you can get overboard. That's not a big deal, but you don't have to have that. Not to build a world. So, and that's, it's great to know that not everything is vital. You can skip things for a while and it'll be fine.
Right.
So Starcop's bringing up a question here. I believe I understand this question, so I'm going to form it to you. So as you made your world, you started making your world before you got the anime book.
Yes. Yeah.
So when you got the anime book, did you have anything in your world setting that you said, oh crap, I need to change my world setting to accommodate this? Or did you just say, screw that page, I'm going to ignore it?
So I didn't have to accommodate my world to the book. One of the reasons I didn't have to is because I didn't want to. For 2 reasons. One, because as much as I like this, as much as I want to run this, I have friends who don't really care about this. They want to run a D&D campaign in my world.
Sure.
And so I didn't want to have anything rely on this book in this world. Not to the point where I needed this to play this.
Right, you didn't want it to be source material dependent.
Right. So there were things that this book inspired a lot into my world, but I don't need this book to have those things. I can pull the stats from the creatures and stuff and call it a day. I don't need the whole book.
Okay.
So there was stuff from the book that inspired, but I didn't need to change anything in here. I did rewrite stuff sometimes. Like I have a nation that's entirely made up of beast type creatures. And at first I was like, oh, it'd be really interesting if they're at war with this other nation. And then I was like, no, it wouldn't be that great because I could do this. And so I changed it and rewrote everything. And then I changed it back because I was like, no, it's a really interesting concept. And so I erased everything and rewrote everything, and it was stupid. So there's things you change your mind on, but I really didn't want to need the book to make my setting work. I wanted my setting to work regardless of the book that I chose.
To that point there, don't erase things, guys. Save versions.
Exactly.
And then you end up with file names that are really cool, like Troy's video thumbnail, final, version 7. Really final this time, 3. I mean it, 11.
we were working on something and he was saving stuff and he pulled it up on the hard drive and there's like in their folders like I said, how many videos we do? He's like, we only did one.
It's one video with like 1 million clips to
Okay.
30-second video, 6 hours later,
And
video clips.
and I keep my stuff organized. Organization makes a world of difference. So I have a file just for the lands and leaders of the world, and then I have a file for just the deities and stuff for the world, and then I have a file for and then all the details of whatever I need are in that file, so I can find it quickly and easily and update it. And it makes a world of difference for me.
Have you ever thought about publishing it?
No, because I'm a terrible writer, because I don't read. I can tell you any story you want, all lies, but I cannot. I cannot write anything. I'm horrible about it. I write a lot, but I don't. I have not written anything out to be. I feel like to be like a published work. I've never. I don't even know what that would look like because I don't read.
Well, this is good to note though, is that when you write a world setting, it needs to be something that you can run. It doesn't necessarily need to be a published level material or material that you can hand to someone else and say, here's my world setting. It's your creation and it needs to be at the level you'll need it to be to run it effectively, tell your stories.
So speaking as somebody who has written a lot of D&D stuff over the years, and now I'm taking that turn to trying to turn some of the stuff into published pieces. It's a whole other level of work that I really want to do this because I think the end game would be really cool to get there. But I've already written this. Why is it so much work to do it to this level? It's already written. I just got punctuation and a picture
and formatting.
Why did it take 2 more years to make this one adventure? It's totally crazy.
And I learned from that, Dad, and the campaign that I'm currently building, I'm writing it as I go with the intent of when I'm done, I can hand that book to somebody else and they can run my campaign.
That's a lot of work to put into it in the first place.
Yes, and so I'm writing it like that specifically as I go along, so it's got everything already in there.
So one of the things that we're also working with is the library in Nixon, Ozark. And so I'm writing a whole mess of children's appropriate material. And I'm using the Golden Books as my inspiration because that's material I chose for a couple of reasons. It's material that parents are already comfortable with, and they're ages 6 to 10, and their parents learning how to play D&D. So I didn't want to come out here with Tomb of Annihilation.
I'm sorry, Billy, but you've touched the sphere of annihilation, and now your dwarf fighter is missing his arm.
Return
your breeding
right. So I wanted to make material that the parents would be okay with a 6-year-old playing and having fun with.
Yeah.
And I don't want to give away my trade secrets for that because my first one of that series is really close to being published. Again, that'll be my second self-published item, and I tell you, it is a lot of work to take it from, because after you write it and it makes sense to you, first thing I do is go, "Hey Matt, read this," and he goes, "What are you talking about? What?"
Yeah, I'm like, scribble. He's like, "What are all these notes?" I was like, "I didn't know what you were talking about."
Like, how could you not know what I'm talking about?
What is a skittle-a-boo?
But that's my next step. Is I've written it to the point where I think it's complete. And I take it, and before he leaves tonight, I'm going to say, "Matt, I want you to read this. It's only 4 pages. So hopefully he'll be done cussing at it in 30 seconds. But it is a whole long level of, and I can appreciate you not wanting to make that jump, but because you have a tremendous volume that you've written already.
Yeah.
And I would encourage you to consider publishing it for yourself, just so you have a book you can take around and show off, "Hey, this is what I did. This is my world setting."
Yeah, so this is simply just the player's guide.
Yeah, the player's guide that covers like 5 or 8 planes or something.
Well, and it's 32 pages with some art. There's actually some really nice art. But, 32 pages, one of the several books in the
yeah.
Oh, wow.
That's one box set.
One box.
You guys want to publish some stuff?
No.
So
Right. So when I look to, I want to make something published, it has to be written to a level where literally anybody can read it and understand the goal of it, and have the same experience in the end that you intend from them reading it.
I feel like with a campaign, that would be a daunting task. I feel like with a world, you have to write a book.
when we see that,
This would be a box set.
Yeah.
You would have what I would envision is each of your continents having a booklet,
40 page.
kind of like a traveler's guide. Welcome to this land, and make it players, and you got one book for the DM for everything, and maybe a booklet for your unique monsters, and of course maps of all kinds. The more maps you include, the better everything will be. What I like to do with players is I'll make a map that's fancy with all the stuff on it, and then I put a piece of paper over it and I trace it and leave off all the good stuff. And here's the player's map. So sometime early on in the adventure, they find this map, and it's a handwritten map, and it has notes written on it and all over the place because that's what the pirates are using or whoever.
Yeah.
Right.
yes.
Exactly. So the players get a map, and it's not complete. Maps of the day of 14 to 1700s. You had a cartographer that went with you. I think Columbus had 6 of them, and their whole job was to map their way there. Once they got there, everything they did, and on the way back, they kept maps, and that's how they were able to recreate their route, because the cartographers It was meticulous. Hell, when who was the two guys that we bought the Louisiana Purchase? They went across
Lewis and Clark.
Lewis and Clark.
Yeah.
They went across the United States. They measure the ground from sea level, and you see the guys on the side of the road. You got one looking at it with a camera, and the other guy's got a red and white stick.
Yeah.
They're measuring how many feet above sea level, because they start with this number, and they know he goes up in elevation, so they're making a map of the elevation. And Lewis and Clark's map of elevation from, what was it, St. Joe to California, was off by less than 15 feet. Ooh. So
I'm dumb.
the guys, I've been off by a whole planet. But the cartographers in that day and age, it was very, very meticulous and lots of math. Nowadays we have a GPS, you hit a button, we're done.
Yeah.
But
Or laser level
if you make, so when you give your players a map, I tell you guys out there too, your player's map should not be anywhere near as complete as the DM's map.
Yeah.
And they get to add on. I encourage them. Here's a pen or a pencil. Add this new city that you just found, or here's this road you just found. Here's this battle you just found. Mark it on your map.
Yeah.
And it creates an interactive. Anyway, that's just me.
I give my party a magic book called Maps. So anytime that the players get frustrated and go, "Where the hell are we?" I'm like, "Oh, your backpack just vibrated."
Idiots. So
Starcop's trying to cheat, I think, by eating beans to make worlds.
Well, no, I think what he's saying there is that every one of the box sets that he sends out should have a box of farts in it because of the beans.
oh no.
All right.
That's what I got from that.
So, Mr. Producer, let's go, and we're gonna show all of Ben's maps here in full screen,
Okay.
one at a time. Tell us. Start with the world map.
So you
I've
can
been
see
going
what.
through them sort of as we've been talking about them.
Right. I just want to revisit these because it's one of the big areas that Ben did a lot of work.
So here's the full
Yes.
world map going up first.
All right.
So when he gets that up there, you can tell us what we're looking at.
So again, it's the world of mana, and our stream's a little delayed.
Yeah.
So
Yeah.
So yeah, the first one's the whole world of
Yeah.
Mana, which if you look in the bottom left hand corner of that map, is the OG map. And it's now just a region.
right. So that's going to be, guys. The bottom left corner is the regional, but
So should I start with the regional first?
no,
no, this
you
is
can go ahead and swap between them there for us.
Yeah.
But you'll kind of get an idea of sort of the work that Ben did. So
Oh, yeah,
again,
I can see in the top right of that little section there's that white spot, and then
Yep.
I'll switch over
Yeah.
here, and you'll be able to see the white spot at the top right again.
right. So you started with your region, right?
Yeah.
The beans on
And
paper.
this was going to be my whole world. This little region was my whole world. I was all excited and stoked. I was like, look at this amazing thing I made. And it wasn't enough for me.
Look at this amazing thing I made.
So-
Sucks anymore.
Exactly. That's exactly what happened. So then I made my whole world map. And
Yeah.
I've got a lot more details on it. And the picture you're seeing is not the complete version of it.
Yeah.
Because I didn't want to give away everything. But yeah, so I've added a few more continents and stuff out in the world.
Yeah. So as Mr. Producer is switching back between those, hopefully you guys can see sort of what we're looking at. Bring us back into the region, Mr. Producer, and we'll have you give us a tour.
Yeah.
And then it should pop up. Which of the nations did you start with first? I know you threw the beans down, you traced your stuff out. But was there somewhere on the page that you started first with adding your details?
Yeah, so I actually started in the top right corner, which if you can see well enough on the screen, I think it's the Kingdom of Kinds is one of them, I think, and the other one is, and the other one is the Fullbring Empire. I think those are the two in the top right. There's a lot more now. And I may not have maps for both, but I hope. I
No,
do
we've
maps
got
for both.
Fullbring Empire and Kinds are both over there, so
good.
we'll be able to pop those up in a minute.
Are you sure about those names? It sounds kind of made up to me.
It's all made up.
I don't see the empire.
Fullbring Empire.
Glory to the Empire.
It's Fullbring.
I
Yeah.
don't see it.
Okay, well,
Doesn't exist.
it'll be on the other layout, Mr. Producer. You so you can bring us all up with the
Back in
chat.
the regional.
No, the other scene with the chat and show off.
Oh, okay.
So Fullbring will be over there. But is this the Kinds map we're looking at now?
Yes, that's the Kingdom of Kinds, and that is the kingdom that is entirely beast type races and monsters.
Okay.
Oh,
So it is, and it's a functioning kingdom. It has a king. It has a royal family type of thing.
Mhm.
Like it's it's a legit kingdom. It's not just a bunch of tribes and stuff. So
Yeah.
and it is on the border with the Fullbring Empire, which of course is a very magic heavy nation, and they're kind of a purist nation, if I'm honest. Elves and humans are the primary races in that nation, and in that nation, those guys are, again, they're purists. So any other race is lesser than them, and almost any other race can be put into slavery. Like they're not necessarily the greatest people.
For sure.
It's like, welcome to Minzo Bronzon. You're now our slave.
But they share the same landmass.
Yes,
right.
They're on the same continent.
Okay. And so now we've got the Fullbring Empire brought up here. Ben, what are some of the interesting features of the Fullbring Empire?
So the Fullbring Empire is the one that has a very large magical forest where creatures keep popping up.
Okay, so that's
and if you look closely at the forest, you can see like this weird structure in the center. And that's part of the fun. That's something to explore. So it's got a large forest. It's got a couple of smaller islands that have some villages on them. It's kind of because it's on the water, they're fishing villages and stuff. And then because they're a mixed race kingdom with elves and humans, you'll see different architecture from different buildings and stuff. And and there's not a ton of options on Incarnate. You can upload your own stuff, but I am not an artist, obviously, on my map. So I used what they had, and I kind of just tried to mix it and blend it so you could tell it's different structures. You can tell that there is a diversity in who survived the calamity on this con.
So the which one you have next for us, Mr. Producer?
Looks like after that one, the Undercity full map.
Let's take a look at the Undercity. We hadn't really shown that off before, but it is a really neat feature of your world.
Yes. So the Undercity is actually part of the Kingdom of Kinds. So above ground, the monsters and stuff that are there don't seem as populated. That's because a lot of them live under the mountain in the Undercity.
Oh, okay.
So that Undercity is not actually the Undercroft. That's a whole nother, area. This is just the city that is under that mountain. And that's where the king resides. That's where he rules from for the above ground part as well.
Oh, wow. All right.
Yeah. So yeah, that's where that's at. That city is there. And it's a large mixed race of different beasts and, orcs, goblins, kobolds, demonagas, lots of stuff.
All right, Mr. Producer, what we got coming at us?
Weeping Islands.
So this is the flying island that is really cool, and
so they're the flying islands. The lore name for them in the world, if you were to try and hunt down the history of the flying islands, you would find tales of the Weeping Island. And they're the Weeping Islands because, of course, the calamity, the millions lost, in this huge conflict, and so it's called the Weeping Islands in the lore if you can find it.
Oh, I thought it had something to do with these rivers, like waterfalls. As they go by, it's
so
like
because
raining.
it generates water, it also falls off the island, and so another reason why it's called the Weeping Islands. Yep. So yeah, that's what it is, and there's a whole nation that lives on these islands, and so what I'm showing is the largest part of the Flying Islands. This is where the capital's at. This is where a large population lives there, and the race that is on this island. There's two main races, and one of them is kind of like the elves from Lord of the Rings. They live until they're killed, not until they die of old age. So they've been around since before the calamity, so they know everything that's happened. They hold the lore of the world. So it's something to be sought after if you get the chance.
Is this where the airbenders are?
Effectively, yes. And they have a lot of knowledge of the ancient magics and stuff, so there's a lot of really powerful magic users here, things like that.
Up next is Sindril.
I haven't heard you mention this area today. Tell us about Sindril.
So Sindril, which is I think this part right here on this little map. It's the Republic. So this is one island. This is one island of Sindril. I have not drawn up all the maps for Sindril yet.
Okay.
Because there are 3 islands connected in one government, which is the Republic. And so each island has a primary race, human, orc, and elf. And they all intermingle. And of course, because there's 3 different races, there are 3 different main parties to the Republic, which of course gets even more interesting than just our 2-party system. And then vying for power. That's kind of the main thing of the Republic.
So, Mr. Producer, pull up the regional map, and I want the audience to take a look at the left side of the map. That 3-island chain is the Republic of Sindril. The picture we were just looking at is the northmost. Or was it the bottommost or the northmost?
Yeah.
I don't know. He's got some islands. There's some pictures.
So the Republic of Sindril is on the left side. It's the 3-island tower on the left side of the map. The Kingdom of Sauron is the very bottom of the map. and that's another map that I think you may have.
Should have it. The S name.
Yes, right down here. That looks like the same shape.
Yeah, it's as good as I can get. I am not an artist, so what's on this map is not necessarily exactly what looks the same because I have to redraw it to make the region bring it from region down to continent and from continent down to cities, and so it doesn't always look exactly the same. And
Well, it's Florida.
Yeah.
So that's where the crazy people are from.
Yeah. So this is the region that there are no magic users born in, and is basically an anti-magic region. And this is one of the areas where I have a civil war going on. Fun tidbit for that. There are underground cities here as well, kind of like the planet of Utapau, Star Wars.
Oh, yeah.
The giant holes in the ground that are cities that spiral up.
Yeah.
It's like that.
Oh, cool.
So, and then of course there's mountains that they dig in as well. And this particular land is the one that had that cloud of undead.
Mm-hmm.
The spell that went wrong has to do with a war. It's great. It's lovely.
It's great. It's good times. I promise. So,
the best part about maps is they don't have to be accurate.
It's true.
Who needs an accurate map?
Bring us to the show off scene there, Mr. Producer, and and then the region map there.
That's not it.
No, he's figuring it out. We overloaded them a little bit today with a lot of pictures and things. So,
Those of you on internet land, we're still looking for somebody to take Mr. Producer's position.
it took me forever to disembody him again. Oh my gosh.
We'll pay you double what we pay him.
Might be even some beans. So again, you used Incarnate and enjoyed that tool. I think you made some fantastic maps. And
Thanks.
it's going to go a long way towards just giving you the information you need as a game master. But I think when you finally have an opportunity to start playing and your players are moving around your world, they're going to appreciate those maps as well. It's going to be very cool.
I'm excited about what they're going to do and what they'll find in the world that I put in there, because there's a ton of stuff that I put in there that
So
I want them to find at some point.
when do you start playing?
Hopefully soon. I just contacted a couple of my players asking if they'd be ready for Session 0 sometime in the next few weeks.
Nice.
With the holidays coming up, I probably won't actually start, but I'd like for them to start getting exactly what they want lined up so I can start catering, getting my world built to what they're going for.
Are you playing at your house or at CK?
I'm planning on playing at my house for this group because I do not have all these maps figured out, but I can hook up my laptop to my TV and have a full-size map for them to look at anytime they need it. So whatever region they're in. Also,
cheap.
I have an app that I can use for battle maps, so that way I don't have a lot of miniatures, but I have tokens and stuff that I use.
Yeah.
So I can use that, but I'm hoping with this app that I have, I can actually do full battle maps on the TV as well, so they can point out where they want to go and I can move them around and stuff.
So let us know when you're ready, and we'll come over so you can do some playtesting.
Yeah.
Let
By
us break it.
playtesting, I'm going to,
Well, that's the point.
Break it.
And because it's not reliant on this, I can run it as D&D, the things that people are more
Oh
familiar with.
no! I want
could bring
the
it to
guy with
forward.
the big sword.
Yeah, right.
I will probably...
There, right there.
Where's Saitama at?
It's called a Tech Knight.
Yeah, Tech Knight. Tech Knight is pretty cool. So I changed the Tech Knight in my world, the class, not only in that this is magic armor and a magic sword. So this person may not be able to use magic, but he has items that are imbued with magic, so he can use those items and how they're built.
Okay.
Because you can make items, you can make magical items, and they show you how in this book, to where that sword can shoot a beam of fireball or whatever. You can have certain amount of charges in it that will recharge over each day. And so, for instance, to fire that fireball, you can set limiters on it. I can only fire a fireball 3 times, and to fire it, I have to wiggle my nose. Stupid limiters that require an action or something.
Or like that one guy's sword from Scape where it splits in half.
Yeah. So you can
also
do
a
all
rifle.
kinds of stuff.
Yeah.
Yeah, that's what I'm saying.
Yeah.
Energy rifle.
So there's all kinds of stuff that this book breaks down. So you
As long as I get the big stupid sword.
Yeah.
So you can. The way they did it, so that way it balances out, is so if you wanted to be able to fly,
You guys full screen?
you can just fly, or you can say, well, I want to be able to fly, but I want to be able to fly faster, but I don't have the points for it. So instead of being able to just fly faster, I have to have wings to fly,
Yeah.
and then I can have 2 I can boost my flying speed so I can be faster. The problem is, if you get shot in the wing, you can't fly at all. So there's limiters on things to kind of build it in a more fair fashion.
So it'll be pretty interesting.
Yeah, I'm excited.
I know that was one of those Kickstarters when we first met you. You had gotten your first release of the PDF.
Yeah.
And it took quite a while to get the physical copy, only because their Kickstarter sort of exploded and they had more physical copies to print than they initially anticipated.
Yeah. And
so there was a lot.
COVID was right around that time too. So as soon as they started kind of getting off the ground, COVID hit and all of their shipping from their facilities went down the drain.
Right.
They're like, we have all this stuff. Woo! It'll ship next year.
It's a well-made book, great artwork.
Yeah, the artwork's pretty fantastic.
Cool. So, do we have any questions there out in viewerland for Ben or the Game Masters here as we're talking about world building before we get this sort of wrapped up?
StarCop kind of agrees that maps don't have to be accurate because they are graphic representations of a portion of the Earth's surface drawn to scale. Drawn, it's artist conception. So
the best I can do.
What is a funny thing? If you go on Google and look at antique maps, you'll see portions are drawn. The beach is drawn perfectly with all the different terrain of it, but then the land behind that they didn't know about. So when they were on the other side of that continent and they drew the beach there as well, the landmass is not proper.
Yeah.
Because they didn't go there.
They might just have 2 or 3 triangles in the middle because they can see that there's a mountain there.
Yeah.
So it's like one of my favorite ones is that the United States is shown to be this wide all the way to Panama.
Oh yeah.
They didn't know about Florida, Mexico, and it's all the way like just straight down to South America. You know.
Yeah.
Anyway, some of my favorite maps are those antique maps on Google.
Yeah.
But it doesn't have to be accurate. It adds to the fun. But that's not on the map. But you found it.
Yeah.
You should add it.
And that was one of the things I wanted to. The maps were more for me than for them. Like, it's a help for them, but for me, it's so I can keep track of major locations in case they're in that direction and they might see it or things like that. It's a useful tool for me. For them, it's kind of just like, hey, you're in that area. Goodbye.
One of my favorite things to do, because you look at those old school maps and there's always like sea dragons and krakens and stuff like that, right? Well, if you have your players that are like sailing across the ocean and they run into one of those things, like, oh, I thought that was just artistic rendition. No, it's on the map, bro. Like,
Yeah, right there.
there's a dragon there.
Yeah.
Oops.
One of my favorite kids movies, pirates. They're like, oh, we can't go that way. There's a dragon there. Oh, they just draw that. It's not really there. And then it shows their little ship going this way, and then I told you.
Nice.
Yeah.
So, Ben, as you reflect on your journey for world building, what were some of the things that some advice you might give to people looking to start this project?
My advice is take inspiration from anything you can get. I mean, anything. Like I said, I made characters that I want my players to meet because I listened to music that had no words to it. It was just cool music. And I was like, it sounds cool. That could be an intro theme, because I don't know if anyone else does this. You hear music and you imagine a character that walks into a room in like an anime type fashion, like one of the fancy butler that can kick anyone across the map. Like, it's just a cool character. And so music can be an inspiration for me. Books, if you're a book reader, I'm not. Movies, shows, and then talking to people. It's a wonderful thing to talk to people about random things that they've read or seen or heard, and you're like, oh, that's a really cool idea. So you add it into your world.
What was your favorite thing about building this world?
My favorite thing about building this world, I got to make something. I'm not a skilled person with my hands when it comes to crafting things. Tools are not my shtick. Cars, I cannot fix. Like, I'm not the handiest person when it comes to using my hands for many things. The only thing I've done with my hands is play music, and that's not creating anything. My favorite thing about this is no matter how bad I drew, I could still do it.
Right.
And
this was yours.
What I needed, yeah.
When you were done with it, this was yours.
Yeah, so everything I created, I created my own pantheon, I created some of my own races, monsters, I created my own map, I created my own world and lore, theology, you know, whatever it is, it's mine. I created it, and so if someone else wants to play in it, that's great, and that's exciting to me, is to see that someone else enjoys something I made.
Whose question was that, Mr. Producer?
Star Cop.
Star, yes. Thank you for the question on that one. So, any other questions?
No, the only thing else I would add would be that no matter how long it takes, just don't give up and keep all of your notes, because it is a process that takes forever, and
So
the more information you have, the better.
So knowing now all of your trials and tribulations that you've done over the last couple of years, and we scoffed at you for doing this, would you do it again?
Oh yeah, 100%. And the scoffing was nice.
we did scoff politely.
It was true.
We did wrong.
Well, because at least you guys were honest with me. Like, you realize this is going to be like the rest of your life doing this stupid thing, right? No, it'll be fine.
3 years later.
Yeah. It is. It's a lot, but it's again, it's worth it. If you want to make something, but you know you're not particularly skilled in something, and you don't want to take the time to drown in that, you can drown in this instead.
I think one of the coolest things about making a world like this is that it is always changing. Just because this is how it is now doesn't mean that's how it has to be later, because the world does evolve through time.
Yeah, and I don't have to play in the time setting I made. I have 2 other time zones.
Well, not only that, but as you have players playing through it, if they do things, you can have that become part of the history.
Yeah, I have a friend of mine who I want him to make a character, so that way I can put it into the world. And I'm not going to tell him how or when it's going to be a part of the world and in what what facet it's going to work. But I want him to make a character so I can add it in the world. Because I may add it in as a famous hero or an immortal, or maybe I'll add it in as one of the deities, but I want him to add it in because it's something he made, and I want to show what it can do.
Nice.
Because these characters in Anime 5e get stupid strong.
Mm-hmm.
Like the speed skill in this thing, at like 4th level speed, you're moving like 200 feet around or something stupid.
Yeah, the Flash.
Yeah, there's other ones that can teleport entire continents just when they want to, you know?
That's one of my favorite 3rd edition feats that you could get. It's called Run. It made your run speed 4 times normal and gave you a +5 to your jump skill. So you were like Hulk jumping and running miles. Step, quarter mile. Step, quarter mile.
So yeah, I love being able to build, and this was something I could build without having to be skilled at drawing. I didn't have to be skilled at woodworking. I didn't have to be skilled at fixing my car. None of that mattered. All I had to be able to do was imagine things and make up silly names and call it a day.
Making silly names.
Throw the beans at
The beans. Give it the beans. Literally. So,
I kid you not, a handful of beans, a pencil, and some crazy wacky ideas.
It's one of the larger endeavors that you might take on in the hobby.
Yeah.
But it also has a reward that's commensurate with the effort that it requires.
Yeah.
So if you can get to the point where you've got the world in a state that it can be played in, that's a big deal, because now you're playing in a world of your creation with your party, with your friends at the table, and that's the real big payoff right there.
Yeah.
The other thing I want to mention is that you do not have to write something that's fully complete.
Yeah.
You need to write enough to be able to start playing in, and particularly when you're using pre-generated material, just being able to put yourself on the map, understand what's immediately around the area and what the problem is, can get you writing your stories and developing your world from the bottom out.
Yeah. Building from a town or a city or village would probably, again, be so much easier because you'd have your players pushing you forward in building. For me, I didn't have players pushing me forward in building. I just had my insanity random things that I thought were cool. But having players really helps you develop things, because they'll do random things that you do not expect and be like, you know what, I guess there is a town here now. And it makes you develop, and it almost inspires you as you're going.
Well, Troy, we were talking a little bit about 2nd edition clerics, and you had a character in particular that would establish churches.
Absolutely.
And so even your character had a huge impact on the world setting.
I call him John the Baptist.
Mm-hmm.
And every time we go into an adventure, if I healed you, you were charged for that out of your later.
Yeah.
When we got done and we're splitting up the treasure, I'd have everybody a bill. I cast a spell for you. Remember that?
Yeah,
I
yeah.
think you should tithe. And I put your leg back on. You remember? How much is your leg worth to you, fella?
Well,
And
the whole thing was he was collecting to establish churches.
I would take the money, and when we got to any size village, I would find a stone cutter and a few people, and I would, here's a bag of money, and I want you to build a church in this town, and I'm going to hire a monk to come and bless it and everything, and I'd get it all set up, and then we would leave. And it came in handy because later, as we're kind of making a big circuit going back around, I reminded my my DM at the time, Rick, that we've already been here, so there should be a small cathedral here. And so that's where we're gonna go stay and get healed and everything. And he's like, "What are you talking about?" So you remember when I pulled out the paper? Remember when I donated all this money and I built a church here? He goes, "Oh." So we went over to my church and got healed and stayed the night and had a nice place to stay. And then again, I give them another large bag of money from our church. John was broke all the time. We would go somewhere, he would have maybe 20 gold to his name, and everybody's like, "Oh, so you don't have anything." I'm wearing my armor. I have a backpack with some, basic stuff. And even when he got up to like 10th and 12th level, he was still just had hardly any money, but everywhere we went. And I think before I really retired him, he's over here in a folder somewhere. I think it was like 15 churches that I had built everywhere. So what I was gaining up to, Rick and I both in the world setting of Greyhawk, if you bring that much recognition to your God, the next time you get in the deep something happening and you go, "Help!" they're more likely to send somebody to pull you out of the quicksand and, brush off the fire that's on your hair, to help you out. And that's one of the things that I liked about playing a cleric was that whole religious aspect. And some players, even today, they try to play down that aspect of the cleric because they're just not comfortable with it, or the party's not comfortable with the religious aspect, which is understandable.
Yeah.
Some people just aren't comfortable with it. I embraced it and had a lot of fun with it.
Yeah. Well, and I think that's part of the fun of role playing. I think that's why building a world is so much fun, is because you can kind of decide how much religion is in your world and how much isn't, or how much science is in your world and how much isn't.
The point that I was getting to is this is what you've got to look forward to now, Ben.
Yeah.
You've got, like, your next step is to take your creation, let players play in it, and you'll see new life breathed into areas you've never even considered before.
Yeah.
Yep.
So
and this nice, pretty, shiny city that you built.
Oh yeah.
no,
It's all over.
One barred and a couple seduction checks later.
So Star Cop's asking, I think it's a question to each of us.
Yeah.
What is something that we like in world building? So I know what I like in. Okay, I'm going to be honest here. I've never built an entire world because of all I knew what was involved. I have built several cities and portions of countries, and in just doing those, I found out that was going to be too inclusive. It would eat up too much of my time, and I chose to dedicate my time to the story and the campaign and the game, the adventure. And I needed this portion of the land because they were going to go over here and do something. So I would develop that portion, but I would never attempt to make a whole thing from scratch. I like the world building because it does give you the control, and I liked it because of my storytelling for the adventure that everybody's going to go into. So I would develop that portion. Build a whole world? No, I'm too lazy.
My favorite thing to build in my world that I've built so far, the favorite thing that I've done, I think, is the history and lore. I found a lot more joy in the history of the world and in the lore of the world than I found in almost anything else. The commerce was the most cumbersome part, but my two favorite parts were lore and history, because I got to make all of it up and decide how it happened and what happened, and that was a lot of fun to experiment with and dig into, because I could decide whether there were 5 gods that made the world or 1, or whether there were 6, and then there were 20, and then there were 37. I got to decide that, and then I got to decide the history of the world and the kingdoms that are in those worlds and those family lines and dukedoms and stuff.
You do like the Romans, like every year there are more because, Zeus is out there having babies.
Yeah.
That was a thing.
which it kind of brings in the immortals that I built.
Yeah.
You know, so yeah, there's a lot.
What do you like about building a world, Boris?
So as everyone
Now,
knows,
you also do Star Wars.
well, this is what I was getting to. I do a lot of sci-fi. So
yeah.
Star Wars in particular can be interesting because it allows you to present different challenges that are not some stormtroopers or smuggling through the checkpoint or something of that nature. The environment can be the challenge. And a lot of times with Star Wars, the environment like can almost be a character, right? Tatooine is a character as well as a location. So much has happened on Tatooine, in, around, and because of Tatooine.
It's got a rep.
Well, its importance to the story in the era that we find ourselves experiencing Star Wars, it's very central. Same thing when you get to Naboo or something like that. Sci-fi, you tend to have sort of these monotheistic planets, right? This is a desert planet. This is a forest planet. Obviously, there's more geographic diversity in planets and things of that nature. So I like to be able to show that sometimes, but not all planets are entirely breathable. Some members of the crew may not be able to live here as well as they can live there. You know, Amon Calamari does not want to go and hang out on Tatooine. There's not enough water for him.
My mom calamari doesn't even get off the ship on Tatooine. No.
So
It's gonna be a fun session, guys. I'll see
It's
you.
a fish.
but you know, the Rebel Alliance scouting for planets, those are cool stories. I really like the location and how being in these locations can be a big driver for the thematics and the drama of everything else that you're doing. When you consider the monastery is built on the top of mountains, right? There's a lot of significance to that, but there was also a lot of challenge to make that happen in the first place. So, you know, the one that was really interesting to me as a location was Hoth. These guys went to a frozen iceberg of a planet, laser beamed out some hollows, and put some spaceships in there and called it a hangar. You know, that the whole thing is frozen. And the reason they did that, though, is they needed somewhere out of the way, somewhere that's inhospitable and difficult because they were hiding from the Empire. And they needed to make it difficult for them to be found, tracked, and dealt with. So, you know, the exploration and building on Hoth is just as important as the subsequent battle on Hoth. And that's where I like being able to use location as to highlight the themes and things that drive the story.
Yeah.
The other thing that I really like about world building is the NPCs, particularly when it comes to dealing with sci-fi. Cyberpunk bad guys. You know, you've got your corporate a-holes and those sorts of things. But you and I were talking the other night at one of our roundtables about Rutger Hauer's character in Blade Runner.
Yes.
And he delivers 2 or 3 monologues in there that are just epic. And he as a character is the storytelling vehicle they use to highlight, you know, what is humanity, and the different themes like value of life and this and things that are just all throughout the movie, and you see a lot in Cyberpunk. So, you know, whether it's interesting locations or very interesting NPCs, both of those, particularly with sci-fi for me, are ways that I can either tell the story or highlight my thematic elements that connect my characters to the setting and make what they're doing have purpose.
Yeah. I think as a GM, it's super important that you get used to role-playing, that you get used to monologuing. Because I feel like it's going to get your players into that kind of thing, too. It's kind of, I think we talked about a little bit one roundtable. We talked about how Paladin is one of those really hard classes to role-play in a game.
It can be.
And that GMs often don't interject enough. You know, when your Paladin becomes a murder hobo...
or he's looking the other way.
Yeah. It's, you know, why isn't something stepping in? And so I remember we were talking about it. I was like, one of my characters is playing a Paladin, but he kind of just killed anything, whether we knew for sure if it was an enemy or not. And I was like, you know, someone has to interject. So when you interject, you have to be willing to fit that role. And so I, you know, sitting there and in a dream, like, listen, you can't tell the difference between good and evil. You can't use that power anymore.
Right.
Until you learn the difference between good and evil, you can no longer detect it.
Yeah,
you take away a Paladin ability, you know.
You make the phone call, the line is busy. This is a good note for game masters, some of our game mastering tips in general. Your party will tend to follow your lead You're almost the de facto group leader in that role. So if you want more role play at the table, you've got to start it.
They will do whatever you let them get away with.
This is also true. So if you don't want them to be murder hobos, make there be consequences.
Right. Yeah. And the different types of role play are cool too. You know, because you got some people that want to role play as their character, and other people want to role play from their character. You know,
My character does this.
Yeah.
That's I hate hearing that.
Yeah, the third,
And I always
third person.
Yes, third person. And when we go to round tables or when we're playing somewhere and somebody will start saying like that, I'm like, I don't tell them they're doing something wrong.
Yeah.
I try, okay, describe to me how you're doing this. I want to hear the details of you walking across the room and you're going to kick the chair out. Tell me how you're doing that.
Yeah. And for me, that third person doesn't bug me as much if they're going, well, I think my character would feel this way, or I think that doesn't bug me near as much as like my character does this. That bugs me far more than explain what your character would feel. I don't know why.
For more cool tips on game mastering and things in that vein, join us on Discord, Facebook, and our other social media sites. We've got a growing community of game masters that you can share your experience with and get help from. Star is one of them, and we really appreciate that he's jumped in enthusiastically.
Yeah.
He loves Planescape, so he's not all bad.
When it comes to world building, though, any final thoughts, Troy?
Don't.
Fair enough.
Keep it small. Otherwise, you wind up with a large project. And I think Ben would agree with this, that it will test your resolve. It will test your dedication to the game, to the spirit of the game. And he's definitely come out on top, in my opinion.
Yeah, with a very cool product.
With an extremely cool product. I mean, I want to play it. I want to play it.
Yeah,
I'll have to bring it sometime so we can run a game.
For sure.
Absolutely.
So, final thoughts on world building for you, Ben?
Do it. No.
Everything that guy said was bullshit.
Troy is a liar.
No.
So am I. No.
The secret's out.
No. I think my final thoughts on world building is if you think you might want to try it, start with some beans and a piece of paper, and take it slow. You'd be surprised what you can come up with and bounce some ideas around. You gotta have other minds, because I don't think any one mind is great enough to really build. I think it takes more.
If you go to our Facebook page, I want to be a GM, our Facebook, they're under the Files tab. We have a 4-page worksheet that lists all the different things to consider when you're building a city, a county, or
It's a smaller region.
Yeah.
But it's one of those
you can
things
expand it and keep
that-
expanding it, and you'll eventually have a whole world.
The worksheet gets you started.
Google is your friend too. I found so many
Google is your
details.
friend.
Any thoughts for you, Mr. Producer?
I was just gonna say that the beans method could actually be used on a much smaller scale. I've done that for making dungeons. I'd throw them down and then connect the dots to make my corridors.
Cities too.
Not too bad. So, we got a bunch of bean handlers. Anyway.
Guys playing with your dinner. I don't know about this.
Well, I stick them on my nose and I launch them to see where it sticks, and that's where the bad guy is.
That's exactly what I expected.
that one's a
I'm
goblin.
not gonna lie, I'm kind of impressed.
So, for me, guys, I'd say take it small. We've talked about bottom up and top down world building through the series. I definitely would recommend the use of bottom up as you add elements to a pre-existing world, particularly as a newer game master. More seasoned game masters, you guys out there have probably built 400 of different dungeons, small towns, regions, and modified things to suit. So give advice if you're a more seasoned game master at this. Help these guys out. We all want to make sure that the community grows and that we share in this excellent hobby.
Help players live behind the screen.
Indeed.
There is no wrong answer. It's your world, and it's all a fantasy. So everything's fine. Everything's good.
Until next time, this has been Dungeons and Dragons Through the Realms Worldbuilder. I'm Jester Borris.
I'm Troy, the Planescape guy, and Ben was our special guest today. Bye out there in TV land.
We'll see you next time.